It is 3:00 p.m. on November 17th. I call this meeting to order. Secretary Delgadillo, would you please read the instructions on remote participation and then call the roll?
Okay. Thank you, Madam President. The minutes of this meeting will reflect that due to the COVID-19 health emergency and to protect Commission members, city employees, and the public, the meeting rooms of City Hall are closed. However, Commission members and staff will be participating in today's meeting remotely. This precaution is taken pursuant to the various local, state, and federal orders, declarations, and directives. Commission members will attend the meeting through WebEx video conference and participate in the meeting to the same extent as if they were physically present. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments or opportunities to speak during the comment period are available via phone call by calling 415-655-0001. Again, the phone number is 415-655-0001. Access code is 2504-207-8548. Again, 2504-207-8548, followed by the pound sign, and then press pound again to join as an attendee. You will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will be automatically muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up, dial *3 to raise your hand to be added to the public comment line. You will then hear you have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you. The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. Ensure you are in a quiet location before you speak. Mute the sound of any equipment around you, including television, radio, or computer. It is especially important that you mute your computer if you're watching via the web link to prevent feedback and echo when you speak. When the system message says your line has been unmuted, this is your turn to speak. You are encouraged to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're on the line with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you change your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from the public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say you have lowered your hand. When the phone is not available, you can use your computer web browser. Make sure the participants side panel is showing by clicking on the participants icon. Make sure the participants panel is expanded in the side panel by pressing the small arrow indicator in the panel. You should see a list of panelists followed by a list of attendees. At the bottom of the list of attendees is a small button or icon that looks like a hand. Press the hand icon to raise your hand. The host will unmute you when it is time for you to comment. When you are done with your comment, click the hand icon again to lower your hand. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and mute you. You will hear your line has been muted. Public comment instructions are also located in the agenda on page 3. Public comment may be substituted in writing. It will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to elections.commission@sfgov.org. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, thanks. Could you take the roll, please?
Sure. President Bernholz?
Here.
Vice President Jung?
Here.
Commissioner Mogi?
Here.
Commissioner Jordanic?
Here.
Okay, with 4 commissioners we meet quorum.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, general public comment on any issue within the Elections Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda. Is there any public comment?
I do see 2 hands raised. First caller, I will unmute you. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Technology, it works. Okay, David Pilpel, hello, and welcome back, President Bernholz. It was not nearly as much fun last month without you. Let's see. I'll discuss the findings on the next item. I've got another meeting at 4, so I apologize. I can only be with you for about an hour. I did note in the director's report a reference to the February 15th election. I think I understood that there might be another election in April. Not clear about that. Maybe we'll hear from the director later about that. And there's certainly a June 7th election, at least for 2 of those and possibly 3. I assume that there will be detailed election plans shortly. And I'm just wondering if there's a need or a good reason for those to go to BOPEC at special meetings, or if those will just come straight to the commission for review. Anyway, that was my thought under item 2, general public comment. Thanks for listening.
So the question is, just so I'm clear, the question is whether the elections plans for each of those 3 February, April, June elections would require a BOPEC meeting. Is that what's being asked?
Am I still on? Yes, that's essentially the question.
Okay. We have been reviewing election plans at the full commission for the last year or so. So I'm not, I wouldn't expect there to be a BOPEC meeting called. That'll obviously be at the discretion of the 2022 president, whoever that might be. But that's generally how we've been proceeding. Thank you for the question.
That's fine.
Oops.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pilpel. Next caller.
Okay, caller, I'm about to unmute you. You have 3 minutes to comment. You are unmuted.
Hello, commissioners. This is Brent Turner calling. I'm just witnessing some newspaper articles. I'm hopeful the commission is familiar with articles coming out in the Examiner, which are creating some very interesting allegations, I guess for lack of a better word, against the Department of Elections for being overly cozy with the vendor, Steve Bennett. And so I'm just wondering if we're going to be speaking about this maybe in future meetings. This vendor, Steve Bennett, that was previously with Sequoia, now Dominion, has been making statements that don't help the public with their confidence in the election situation. So I just think maybe you deserve to give it, maybe it deserves some attention from you. Bennett says his relationship with Ernst and the department is a well-oiled machine, speaking about not the operation, but his relationship with the department. And he made a statement that San Francisco people don't care about voting, and specifically that the Elections Commission doesn't know anything about elections. So coming from our vendor, I'm just hopeful that we pay attention, and maybe John can ask him not to say those things, or we can do something better so that the public has full confidence in the department and in our election. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Turner, could you stay on the line for a minute? I have a question.
Sure.
The last article that I saw from the Examiner, I believe, was dated on Sunday just passed, so that would have been November 14th. Is that the article to which you're referring?
I've seen that. I saw that one, and then I think I saw one a week or 2 earlier. Time is flying by, but there was an earlier one asking, I guess, the question why that he's talking about the Department of Elections. John Ernst is blocking the open source project, but this one was about his particular relationship with Dominion. the one that really got my attention to the point where I thought it was appropriate that maybe the commission, because of the statements that were made by the vendor saying that San Francisco people don't care about voting and the commission doesn't know about elections, I thought it was an appropriate comment from him.
Thank you. Yes, I have seen two examiner articles, and I believe, Martha, unless I'm mistaken, they have both been forwarded to the rest of the commission over the period of time in which they've appeared.
Yes, they have.
It is not agendized as a specific item. I was anticipating that it would be covered during the director's report, or possibly also commented upon during perhaps the open source voting issue. I guess this is partly a question to Deputy City Attorney Flores, whether or not, because it is not specifically called out on this agenda, if it's something we would need to specifically call out before addressing either as questions to the department during the director's report, or given that the open source voting item is directly linked to discussions about vendor options, whether we could consider any commissioner questions regarding this and any conversation to fall under that item. That's to you, DCA Flores.
My apologies. I stepped away for a second. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. The question from the member of the public has to do with whether or not the commission is going to address the coverage of the department that's appeared recently in the San Francisco Examiner. My response to the member of the public was that first was a clarification about the articles to make sure there hadn't been one that I hadn't seen, to confirm that they had in fact been shared with all members of the commission, and that my expectation and understanding, and the reason it's not specifically called out on the agenda here, is that in creating the agenda, I was assuming that conversations, questions regarding this would be addressable by members of the commission, either under the open source voting agenda item, which the articles speak to, or under the director's report item. But since it's not specifically called out, my question is it an off-limits topic of discussion, or if commissioners have questions for the director or vice versa, can it be addressed?
As they relate to open source voting or anything that has to do within the commission, within the director's report, the commissioners may ask questions because we are discussing open source voting on an agenda item, and then Director Arntz has his own agenda item. So if that article falls within those two agenda items, then it may be brought up.
Okay, thank you.
You're
So,
welcome.
to the member of the public, if you're sticking with us, I expect that they will come up at least in those two items. Thank you for your question. Any other public comment?
I don't see any other hands raised. Callers, if you, or commenters, if you can lower your hand so I can be able to tell if it's a new hand or, you know, I can do it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
No other callers, I don't see.
Moving on to item number 3, discussion and possible action on resolution on continuation of remote election commission's meetings. This is the resolution making findings to allow teleconference meetings under California Government Code Section 54953E. This resolution was also adopted in the October meeting. I prefer not to read the entire thing, but it is basically resolving that the commission finds we meet the criteria for continued remote meetings, and the resolution is written in such a way that we need to reaffirm our commitment to this every 30 days. So I would, unless there's any either commissioner comment or public comment on this, proceed with doing so. Yes, Commissioner Jung.
Yeah, I have one comment, which is that we amended it last month to add a clarification that the findings also encompass our committees, namely VOPEC.
Yep.
So would just suggest that going forward that we include that each time to save BOPEC the burden.
To say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last word you said. BOPEC.
The burden of passing it themselves when they meet.
Oh, I see. Okay. So in accepting, in if we are to pass this resolution this time, it would apply to BOPEC over the next 30 days as well. Is what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think BOPEC's going to meet, but I'm talking about
Right.
in subsequent.
Yeah.
Meetings.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you for that clarification and amplification. Any other commissioner comments? Comments from the public?
Yes, we do have one hand raised. I will go ahead and unmute you, caller. You're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay? David Phillips again. Yes, I too was going to reference Vice President Jung's edits from last month and suggest that they be incorporated into the template going forward. I had also made some suggestions that weren't incorporated, but perhaps could be considered in the future. The such resolution on the last line still makes me a little nuts. And in the future, I would, as long as you're having to do this, I would suggest that this be the first action item on the agenda prior to public comment and the minutes, because my understanding is in the event that the commission, for whatever reason, doesn't adopt this motion when it needs to, that the only thing you can do is adjourn, and any action that you take would be null and void. So that's why I would suggest making this the first item of business going forward. But it's at your discretion. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other public comment?
No, no hands raised.
I actually would ask the secretary to make note of the member of the public's last edit, and that ordering those both seem worthy of pursuing. And would you, can I get a motion to adopt this resolution, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Will you call a vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Bernholz,
Yes.
Vice President Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Mogi,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jordanic.
Yes.
Okay, with 4 in the affirmative, the motion passes.
Fabulous. Thank you. Item number 4, approval of minutes of previous meetings. We have the discussion and possible action on draft minutes of the Commission's October 2021 regular meeting. Are there any commissioner comments on these?
I think my only comment was that interlineation was misspelled as interlineation. So the right spelling should be INTER and then lineation. That was
Thank
correctly
you.
spelled.
Fabulous. Anyone else? Any public comment?
Yes, we do have one caller on the line. Caller, you are unmuted.
David Phillips again. Thank you for clarifying the inner or interlineation. It was a new word for me, so I wasn't sure what it meant. So thank you for clarifying. I did have some suggested minor edits that I communicated to Secretary Delgadillo prior to the meeting. We only got as far as page 2. There's some other minor tweakage I might suggest on pages 3 and 4 so that it reads a little better, but it's entirely non-substantive. I was trying to figure out, since I didn't participate in the entire meeting, on the bottom of page 3, the cover letter that was referenced. I didn't see it on the website. I don't know if it's gone yet. Perhaps the minutes could clarify to whom the cover letter was to be directed. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I think the substance of the minutes otherwise is fine with those suggestions. You may or may not want to delegate further non-substantive tweaks, or just adopt the minutes as amended and proposed at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. And Secretary Delgadillo, that substantive identification of a missing cover letter, is that something we can address and clarify?
You mean after the meeting? Yes, I can get together with David and figure out what the exact letter is. I'm not sure.
Okay, so with that amendment and the correct spelling and Mr. Pilpel's other typographical fixes, can I get a motion to adopt the minutes? Commissioner Giordano.
I move that we adopt the draft minutes with those changes.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Yes. President Bernholz,
Yes.
Vice President Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordanik,
Yes.
and Commissioner Mogi.
Yes.
Okay, with 4 in the affirmative, it passes.
Right. Thank you very much. Item number 5, open source voting. Discussion and possible action on open source voting in California. Attachments include a proposed resolution and an email from Brandon Phillips. And I will note that there were additional attachments added to the website on November 16th. I don't have the website visible on my many screens here. Hold on one second. They include President Walton's legislation request comments, which was added on November 16th, a letter from the Secretary of State added November 16th. So those are on the Elections Commission website and relevant to this item. Commissioner Jordanik, can I ask you to walk us through this item, please?
Sure. So there were a lot of really exciting things that happened over the past few days, which is why there were some late additions to the packet. But last Friday, the Secretary of State finally replied to the letter that President Walton and President Canepa from San Mateo County sent her in August. And the letter is generally very good news. The main takeaways are that, number one, the Secretary of State said that she is moving forward with the regulations process, and that's something that could take several months. And she talks a little bit about what that process will be like in the letter. And then secondly, she outlined the things that we should provide to her office in the meantime to move forward with a pilot for disclosed source. And just to let you know what that is, it's a list of each piece of hardware, software, and firmware that will be used and how it complies with the requirements. And then B, what they're calling draft use procedures for the voting system. And then that's something that VotingWorks is working on preparing to be able to submit that information to the Secretary of State. And also, that kind of matches what we were learning from Susan Lapsley at the Secretary of State about the process that she told us verbally. Like after we submit a plan, they work in collaboration with the department to kind of finalize it. And then after it's approved, and then they could adopt the regulations and determine whether or not the voting system complies with that after that process is completed. And I know Matt from VotingWorks has also been in communication with the Secretary of State's office on their side. And I believe he has a little bit more context to share on that. And later during this item, after we do the public comment, I might ask him to just comment on what they've learned. And then the other thing that happened that was significant is yesterday at the Board of Supervisors meeting, President Walton made his public request for the legislation to the board. And I went ahead and just transcribed his comments from the meeting to make it easier for people to see what he said. And that's one of those documents that's a part of the packet. And then the other thing is, at the last meeting, there was some interest among some of you that we adopt some sort of a resolution to support the effort. And I went ahead and drafted something. It came together pretty late because I wanted to wait until after the board meeting yesterday so we could reference that in there. But that is a part of the packet. And really the operative part is there's 2 resolves at the very end, and we can talk about that. a little bit later. But I did ask President Walton's office if that would be helpful to them, and they said it would be. And I also let them review the language, and they said it looked good to them. And I sent it to Deputy City Attorney Flores this morning, so I don't know if she's had a chance to review it. And then finally, there is the letter that President Bernholtz mentioned from Brandon Phillips. He was one of our TAC members, and he's since moved out of San Francisco, but he had some nice things to say about the nonprofit that we're proposing doing the pilot with. So I think that covers what I wanted to say, and I think Director Arntz may have some things to add on his side. And I also just want to publicly thank Director Arntz for the work that you've been doing. I know you have been in contact with Voting Works, and I'm very appreciative for the progress that you've made. But
all right, thank you for that. So I did send the contract template to Voting Works, so we started that process. It'll take some time. Then I'm glad that the Secretary of State's office has responded to the request for regulations, and that was a missing piece that we all needed to have. And also, it's good that President Walton has moved forward to introduce the legislation. That's another missing piece that we all really needed to have in relation to any pilot project in San Francisco. So, Commissioner Jordan, did you say that Voting Works is already going to intend to send information to the Secretary of State's office regarding the ballot marking device and the use procedures?
yeah, well, I'll let Matt speak to it after the public comments, but what I'm not 100% clear on is if they're going to provide it independently or if it'll be provided like alongside the plan. But we can, is that what you're wondering about?
Yeah, and I think that the department has to. I think that the jurisdiction has to move the information to the Secretary of State's office, not the vendor. I could be wrong, but that's my sense. But yeah, okay, that's good though. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. So then I guess the way it would work is that they would prepare that for you, and then you could submit it if that's the way you wanted to do it.
Okay.
Are there commissioner questions or comments on any of the topics mentioned or documents attached?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, but I think, go ahead, Commissioner Mogi.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, Commissioner Jordan, thank you so much for continuing to lead the commission and moving this piece forward. I know that you've just also been doing a ton of work and collaborating with other legislators and with the Secretary of State and advocates and everyone else. I definitely lean on your expertise, especially when you advocate for and talk about open source voting. I just have a question in regards to, maybe it's a line, I try not to believe everything that's being reported in the public or in the press, but at the same time, I just want to help myself understand. When it's a pilot program, does it mean and I'm very supportive of Voting Works. I just want to make sure that doesn't automatically go into a sole, like they're not going to be eventually, if it goes well, like we would have to go through a separate bidding process, correct? This is a separate thing.
Just to me?
Either to Deputy City Attorney or to Director Arntz. I'm just really not familiar with the bidding process, and I just don't want it to kind of seem like, I just want to make sure that we're doing it properly. So.
Yeah. So the Deputy City Attorney Flores, you want to speak on this, or do?
I can bring more information at the next meeting about the bidding process. We do not work on contracts in our unit, and so I could contact our contracting unit to get more information about that.
Can I ask for a clarifying question of Commissioner Mogi? Your question that by conducting a pilot program with what's currently the only known open source vendor, whatever the results of that, any further decisions in vendor selection still requires a full procurement process. Is that the gist of what you're asking?
Yeah, my understanding is that we still should be going through a bidding process, even like separate from the after the pilot program. But if I think Director Arns, you might understand what I'm saying, and if you can answer that.
Yeah, and the answer is yes. So the pilot
Okay.
program is separate from any future voting system being implemented or acquired by San Francisco. Not to say we wouldn't use Voting Works in the future, if there has to be a bid process, just as there was for Dominion.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Mogi. Commissioner Jung, I believe you were next.
Yeah, thank you. I had two comments. One was that I read that letter from the Secretary of State, and I guess I didn't come away with the optimistic read that Commissioner Jordanek had of it, and I'll explain why, which is one, it explains how lengthy the process is, and it talked about certain minimum minimum time periods that one should, that's required under statute. And, just tallying up the different time periods that are enumerated there, it appears that even after the process is started, it takes a minimum of several months, close to half a year. And then the letter itself says that, I think it said somewhere in there that it takes a year. So after the APA rulemaking process is officially started, the Secretary of State has 1 year to complete the process and submit the completed rulemaking file to OAL. In addition, the Secretary of State notes that this is not an emergency and rejected the request to file these regulations as an emergency. And I looked at the statutory section that they cited, the Government Code section 11342.545, and it's not like the Secretary of State misquoted it. It seems like under those rules it is not an emergency. So that's I came away with a slightly different interpretation than Mr. Jordanek did. Yeah, and I also read the materials. Thank you for transcribing the statement from the Board of Supervisors. It's not clear to me why a resolution is necessary from our commission, so not sure that I support that. Second, if we do a resolution, I think it should be accurate and realistic, and so the resolution, I think, should at a minimum make clear that, or should accurately recite what the Secretary of State's expectations are. I do not read the Secretary of State's expectations as that this will happen before the November 2022 election. And yet the resolved or further resolved or finally resolved, I don't remember how Commissioner Jordanek wrote it, but suggested that that's what should happen. And I'm just not sure that's realistic. And this is separate and apart from, I read the transcript of, the board president's request to the city attorney. The city attorney obviously needs to draft the resolution, I guess, or the law is, if that's what they're going to do. But the city attorney has been pretty clear so far that absent these, the regulations being in place, that it would be inappropriate to proceed with this pilot. I don't know if there's been kind of further thought or clarification from the city attorney's office as to its position, whether it can proceed in parallel, but yeah, just some questions about timing and expectations there.
Thank you. I just want to add that I had the same concern about the timing questions, so I'll ask that, add my voice to that question. I guess that's all of the commissioners here. Commissioner Jordanek, yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with you. There's no guarantee that the regulations will be adopted in time And the 1 year that you saw is a maximum. That's the maximum amount of time it can take. And so if this pilot is going to happen, the regulations would have to be adopted soon enough. And I'm thinking maybe on the, I'm guessing like the July timeframe, something like that. But yeah, no, it is a several months long process. Each cycle takes 45 days. I mean, it could just be one cycle. It could be 2 or 3. But and that's why the resolution that I drafted speaks to the one of the 2 resolves speaks to working to get those regulations happening quickly enough. Because if the Secretary of State really takes their time with it, then yeah, the regulations won't be adopted in time, and we won't be able to go forward with the pilot. And that's the other thing. Like, this pilot will not take place if the regulations are not adopted in time. So there's no risk that by moving forward with legislation today, we would be in a position where we're in violation of any law, because we're just sort of doing the preliminary steps, and then it remains to be seen next year whether the other pieces fall into place soon enough. But if we are going to even have a chance of doing a pilot, we have to at least do the beginning step of submitting a plan. And then the last thing I'll say is, when I was talking about the good news, what I meant was, number 1, that they replied, but number 2, they actually said, even though this regulation process is going to take some time to move forward, they said, in the meantime, we encourage you to submit these other materials to kind of do the early work, in parallel. So, but there's no guarantee that the pieces will fall into place in time.
So would it be helpful if I add more information about where the city attorney's office is at in regards to the letter from the Secretary of State? Is this an appropriate time for that? Okay, so like Commissioner Jung, we do not read this letter to authorize a pilot or to tell us to submit a pilot. And if the commissioners want to follow along, the letter is very helpful. And so the operative paragraphs that I am going to refer to are found at the end of page 3, beginning of page 4 of the letter. And basically the Secretary of State's letter says that, we have 2 options moving forward. 1, submit a system for certification, which, it could take 1 to 3 years, and we are not submitting a system for certification. And then the second option is to submit an outline and some information about what we want to do. What I focused on and what my office focused on in this letter is that in this section about how to move forward, the letter did not state pilot program. The letter did not say you may submit a pilot program or submit a pilot program outline or submit a pilot program schedule. Nothing saying that. It just says that we can submit some information to get feedback from them. And so, unfortunately, our interpretations of the letter are different, but the letter, in our opinion, clearly states that we can submit some information to the Secretary of State about our intentions, and we'll receive some undefined feedback as it relates to a project. So at this point, we're still in the same place. And I have reached out to the Secretary of State numerous times to get some clarification on this. And I still have yet to hear from them. And I could continue reaching out to them if the commission wants me to proceed in that fashion. But at this point, we have 2 options. 1, submit a system for certification, or 2, submit some information from to the SOS for some feedback. And that information can be submitted by, is within the duties of Director Arntz to submit in a letter. And I understand that Director Arntz has been in communication with Voting Works to get that information that the SOS is saying we can submit, which is a list of each piece of hardware, software, and firmware that will be used and how each complies with the requirements, and 2, with the requirements above, and 2, a draft use procedures on how the system will be implemented and used by county election officials and poll workers. So those A and B points, Director Arntz can submit via a letter to the SOS to hopefully get some feedback, which is what the letter states we would receive.
Can I ask you a question, Attorney Flores?
Yes.
As you are reading that, and thank you for that information, I just want to make sure that the Secretary of State's option in which the department would submit an outline and documentation, this last paragraph on page 4, the plan that Commissioner Jordanek has referred to, is that the same as this outline and documentation? Maybe that's a question to both you and Commissioner Jordanek.
I would think not. If the Secretary of State had wanted us to submit a pilot project proposal or draft of a pilot project, then they would have most likely stated that. But like I said, I had the same question too, and I can, follow up with the Secretary of State about what that means to them, because I think without what that means to them, I think it is open for interpretation. But I would say I would read the plain language of the letter, and the plain language of the letter does not state that we should submit a pilot project for approval to them.
Although, just as I understand what's included or might be included in what has been referred to date as a pilot project plan, it does include the information, a list of each piece of hardware, software, and firmware, how it does include items A and B as articulated here. Am I misunderstanding this? Correct that the Secretary of State does not refer to it as such, but I'm wondering if what Commissioner Jordanek has been working on still actually meets these requirements. Because it seems to, as I read this, but maybe I'm not a lawyer. There's no maybe there. I am not a lawyer.
And I would still say that that's a question of interpretation for the Secretary of State to make a decision on.
Okay. Let me ask the same question to Commissioner Jordanek then. Is it your understanding that what you've been working on is this meets the definition as described by the Secretary of State here? The outline and documentation should provide at minimum.
So this is the thing that I said that Matt from Voting Works can provide more context on, because they did have more detailed conversations about this exact issue.
With the Secretary of State?
Yeah.
Or with whom? Yes, with the Secretary
of State. But yeah, I think in terms of the plan, I mean, California law says that the jurisdiction needs to submit a plan if they want to move forward. So the fact that this letter does not mention that doesn't mean that you don't need to submit one. I mean, you still need to submit one. I mean, my reading was that they're saying either in addition to or within the plan, this other information would be helpful to them. So I think providing it either alongside or as part of it, like either way would be fulfilled. But I think what they're doing in the letter is basically saying the extra pieces that are not spelled out in state law. So, I mean, they don't need to like invite us to submit a plan for us to submit one, because we have that, you know, ability. I mean, would it be appropriate? Can I like, could he comment on that? Or should we wait until after public comment? It's
Well, he being who? Matt
Matt
from Voting Works?
Works.
I think I want to make sure all the commissioners are clear on any questions they may have, and then we can turn to the public and then to Matt, because it's now given Commissioner Jung's clarifications and Deputy City Attorney Flores's clarifications or questions. I'm not sure if we're past the position I thought we were in last month prior to hearing from the Secretary of State that in fact the City Attorney's Office still doesn't think it can move forward at this point, which even and that two parts of that question is that both in regard to the request or order, I'm not sure what the right term is, from President Walton and in response to the Secretary of State's letter, or is something shifted in the perspective of the City Attorney's Office, I guess is my key question, from where we were prior to receiving these two pieces of information.
Nothing has changed, and this letter confirms our position that we would need regulations, and that what the SOS is saying is that we could submit some information for feedback. And so I do not see an issue with submitting some information, the information they have requested for feedback. Yep. But okay. They're not saying submit a pilot project for approval or submit a pilot project while these regulations work its way out. They're not saying that. They're saying you can submit some information to our office for feedback.
Okay. Okay. And then how does the City Attorney's Office, what is the City Attorney's Office response to the, again, I don't know what the right word is for the statement from President Walton?
You know, we would have to contact President Walton and discuss this with him. Whenever we get any requests for legislation, we follow up with his office or any supervisor's office. But at this point, there has been no contact yet, you know, because it just came out yesterday, the request. Right. So, you know, the process is whenever a supervisor requests legislation, we begin the process by meeting with them, discussing what they want in the legislation, and then doing a thorough legal analysis of whether we can do this or not. And so, you know, in that analysis, we would still come to the same conclusion that, you know, in order to actually do a pilot project in 2022, we would need regulations that have not yet been issued by the Secretary of State, and that may not be issued for a year to 2 years from now. You know, we don't know the process, and they've already declined to issue the regulations on an emergency basis. So we don't want to put a time frame when the Secretary of State's going to come back with regulations, because we don't know.
So does that process between the City Attorney's Office and President Walton's office take longer than a month? I'm just thinking about the next meeting. Is it possible to put a time frame on that?
Yeah, every situation is different. I will note though that given the holiday coming up next week, you know, yeah.
Oh, that.
Yeah, that. So like I said, I can't put a time frame on that either. But given holiday schedule, you know, that may delay things as well.
Okay. So can I play back for what Commissioner Mogi, go ahead.
You want to finish your comment?
Well, I was going to say, I'm now hearing pretty conflicting information from new information has been received. It's being interpreted quite differently regarding the proposed resolution that's on the table. We do have several members of the public who I'm sure have important information to add. But I was trying to I'm trying to publicly track this process because I find it personally very difficult to keep the many pieces in order.
And I think if it is helpful to the commissioners and to the commission generally, you know, our office will again reach out to the Secretary of State for clarification. I think that that may be the most sensible way to proceed because there is a difference in interpretation.
Right.
You know, notably between the lawyers and the non-lawyers. So, you know, we don't want you to proceed on something if you have questions. So I'd rather get the full answer for you before you vote on something. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Mogi.
So, I guess I'm also just like still struggling on maybe interpreting this question, the letter. So it does say that, what is the Administrative Procedure Act, rulemaking process is so it so, oh, it says once it has started. Do we know when they're going to start? So I guess my question is, even in the resolution, or maybe this can have a conversation with Supervisor Walton's office. It's like, I also am very, I understand the importance of being able to launch a pilot program November 2022. And I also read and have been hearing multiple times that it's a very aggressive timeline. And I also want to make sure that we don't lose momentum on this, because we just got this letter that says like it takes 30 days to do this, 15 days to do this, 45 days to do this, and then it's going to take a year. And I'm just like, I'm overwhelmed by this technical response that's coming in that's very important to make sure that we do things right. And I also think that there's this, and you know, we've been having this discussion on open source for a very long time. We had to take a pause because of the pandemic, rightfully so. And I'm in a position of how can we make sure that whether it's with Supervisor Walton or even within the commission, that we can be very focused on understanding this is the process. And we kind of just don't want it to be like, yeah, we're going to start it and it's going to take us a year to about a year or up to a year to finish the process without hearing a start date. And so maybe Commissioner Jordan, it's a suggestion that I don't know if you have if you don't have the answer, that might be a better, or not a better, but a stronger position to take at this moment as we take our little baby steps forward. I'm just trying to figure out a way where, you know, we're not being held back completely, and that we can still advocate for something that this commission as a whole has felt very strongly about.
So,
Commissioner.
I mean, if we want to have the option of doing a pilot in November 2022, then we have to submit a plan before February 8th. And I don't think, I cannot see how the act of submitting a plan is in violation of any kind of a law. Like, I just don't see it. So what is wrong with submitting a plan, and then we can see how next year plays out? And if we don't have time to do the pilot, that's fine. But by interpreting the information so narrowly, we're basically we're like ruling ourselves out of something that we could do that's very positive for the city. So I guess it is a difference of opinion, but I'm just not seeing it from a legal perspective. How does submitting a plan break any kind of a law? Or it just, I'm just not seeing it.
Was that a response to my question or to someone else?
I was saying that.
Well, I asked
I'm
the
s-
question, so I wasn't sure if you answered my question or if you were making a separate comment.
Well, can you restate your question?
I was just saying, like, is there something wrong to either add a line that says we would like to make sure that the process does begin, to make sure the regulation piece does happen, because I don't see a start date in the letter. I have
Yeah.
made zero comments on submitting a plan or anything else. I just wanted to see if that's something that is
Yeah,
a,
well,
is a more strategic approach or not.
so can you be a little bit more specific about what you're thinking? Because I was a little, yeah, like, can you be a little bit more specific in terms of what type of language you're thinking about adding? Was it like to the first resolved or the second resolved, or was it
It would lean towards to ensure that the regulation governing voting system pilot are adopted in the time for San Francisco to conduct a pilot during the November 2022 election. So it's like I guess that would work, but I was just saying that I was reading the letter. It just says that, you know, once the rulemaking AP in page 4, once in the second paragraph, once the APA rulemaking process is officially started, the Secretary of State has 1 year to complete the process and submit a completed rulemaking file to OAL. So I was just saying, is there a way to make sure that they do begin the process? And maybe it's interpreted in the final result, but I just was saying, like, I think that might be the better, to make sure that we push this forward. I was really coming from a place of being supportive.
oh, yeah. So, I mean, I would support language that we can, like, sort of stress the need to expedite things. Definitely. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm totally would be happy with that. Um, I'm still, yeah, and my apologies, I'm still sort of processing the earlier part of this conversation. But yeah, I mean, if the commission is in favor of the resolution and the broad strokes, I think we could add something like that.
So we're talking about two things simultaneously. I just want to be clear for everyone. There is if and how the commission, the department, excuse me, not the commission, but the department and open source vendors might develop and submit both a plan and which needs to be submitted by February 8th and the outline and documentation as requested by the Secretary of State. That seems to be a question on the table about moving that forward. And then the resolution actually has to do with the commission taking a stand on President Walton's request and encouraging the state of California to move quickly on the regulatory framework. Correct? They're related, but two separate things. Okay.
So I mean, just because we're discussing this, I don't want to, if we don't want to go there right now, we don't have to, but I did want to share that Matt he does have more information on this exact topic, but
well, I think we may be ready to go to the public because I'm just looking at the other commissioners to see if there is other concerns or questions at this point.
Yeah, I have just one question slash suggestion. Commissioner Jordanek, I had recommended that after the last meeting that you meet with DCA Flores, among others, to develop a recommendation for us. Were you able to do that?
So I was able to meet with her privately, and we met last Wednesday, and there wasn't really time to have a meeting after that for all three of us. But the other thing that happened is this letter came through after I met with Deputy City Attorney Flores, which sort of like, it kind of like changed. Well, actually, I should say the two significant things that happened after I met with her is that, number one, the letter was sent out, and number two, that the legislation was introduced. Because one of the takeaways when I met with her is that she said that it was really important that the legislation be introduced more quickly so she would have time to actually draft the legislation. So then, so when those two new developments happened, it sort of like, it kind of like changed what we had discussed, because there was now like, we're sort of like in a new, you know, just the whole situation had changed at that point. So I haven't met with her since then. But we did have a long meeting about it.
Follow-up question, Vice President Jung?
I don't have a question. No,
Okay.
I do get the sense that we're not aligned, or at least Commissioner Jordanek, what he wants to do is not aligned with the outlook from the city attorney's office. The city attorney's office represents the city, including us. So there are attorneys. So I want to be aligned with our attorneys on this. So.
Yeah.
But I
Thank
mean,
you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Another approach is, I mean, we're not the attorneys, but we also have our Board of Supervisors, and who is taking an action, and it's his job to interact with the city attorney's office on his legislation. So we could sort of like choose to support that, and then sort of like let them work it out. But
yeah, but I mean, we have a job too, right? And our job is to make sure that what we're proposing makes sense. So I guess that's what I'm proposing. I want whatever resolution we introduce to make sense. And I want the city attorney to have their input on it. And I want to be aligned with the city attorney's office and what we propose. I mean, otherwise, I'm not sure what the point is of our resolution.
well, I mean, I'm confident that the legal issue can be worked out between President Walton's office and the city attorney's office. I mean, that's my hope. Otherwise, like you say, this is all meaningless. I mean,
So we, so Commissioner Jordanek is correct. It's not illegal to submit a pilot program, but it leads us to the same conclusion that it would be going around in circles because we don't have regulations. And so let's say something happened, like let's say we submit a pilot January 15th of 2022. We're within the deadline. And then a year later, we're still waiting for regulations. And then the regulations come out and it turns out that our pilot that we submitted a year before doesn't meet those regulations. So we would have to come back to the board and redo everything. So I think that that's the issue. And I've spoken to Commissioner Jordanek about this. And so I think that, our recommendation is twofold. One, we can contact the Secretary of State to get clarification on their letter, and or two, Director Arntz can submit a letter, to the Secretary of State with the information they requested to get feedback. Because maybe the letter is going to help them and it's going to help us narrow down a future pilot project. I don't think that by submitting this letter with the things that the SOS is asking for, I don't think that delays momentum or stops momentum. If anything, I think it's helping the momentum because the Secretary of State has now written a letter about this and is somewhat committing to creating regulations for this law that has been in the books for, 7-8 years now. So I think that, those are my recommendations. But either way, I think that whatever you do is not going to delay momentum of this. It appears like the SOS, it's on their radar now.
So to clarify again, Attorney Flores, and that's very helpful, it is not inconsistent with the current legal situation for the department to submit documentation and outline as requested by the Secretary of State, up to and including a plan, however that's distinct from documentation and an outline. But the potential here is that the timeline and whatever the final regulations are ultimately might moot that effort, because in an ideal world, they'd exist before we put a plan, but it wouldn't slow them down. It won't preclude them. And if we fail to do that, we miss the opportunity for 2022 altogether. So submitting is no guarantee, still requires regulatory approval, but at least keeps the door open for progress in 2022. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Again, that's why I'm trying to separate what might be submitted by the department versus this actual resolution, which is addressing some other things. Okay. Commissioner Jurdanek, I think I cut you off, or did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to make the point that, yeah, if they take a year to do the regulations right, then we won't be able to do the pilot. It makes the work we did now, it makes it wasted work. But the thing is, if they adopt the regulations in a reasonable time frame, like say 6 months from now, we do want to be in a position where we can take advantage of that.
Right. And in order to do that, we would need to submit a plan by February 8th, or I'm still not clear if these are two distinct documents, but also respond to the Secretary of State's request for an outline and documentation if I'm not mistaken, there's no deadline for when that needs to be submitted to them, but we could conflate those deadlines.
No, but I do think it's important to remember that even if regulations come out, and 6 months is actually a very short amount of time for regulations, I would put it anywhere from 8 months to a year, given the pandemic as well. That factors in. Even if we get the regulations before November 2022, that would still not guarantee us that whatever plan we submitted in February is going to comply with those regulations. So
right.
we may still be out of time. Because if the regulations come out September 30th, 2022, then, we'll still be out of time.
Right. But if we're looking at this from the point of view of not for, and here I'm riffing off what Commissioner Jurdanek has said, not foreclosing any opportunity. We're not guaranteeing ourselves anything. There's still an enormous amount of work that needs to happen at the state level, but we keep the door open. It may amount to work that can't be implemented, but if we don't do it, the chances of missing this opportunity are 100%. I'm looking to DCA Flores and Jurdanek for a nod that I'm reading this correctly. Yeah. Okay. Because again, it seems different to me than what this resolution addresses. The decision from the commission to encourage, request, advise, guide the department to proceed on a documentation and outline and plan is not what this resolution says. The resolution says we're going to support President Walton and we're going to keep advocating to the state, or actually ask the city to advocate to the state.
Yeah. So yes, that is not what the resolution says. And I briefly looked at it this morning. I received it this morning, so I haven't had a chance to thoroughly review it. But if you feel comfortable, if the commission feels comfortable voting on it, you are more than free to do that. So yeah, the resolution is not saying you're asking the department to submit a pilot. It's just saying we support President Walton's request to
Right.
to submit legislation asking for a pilot.
Yep. Okay. Commissioner Jordanek, is there anything else you want to add, or Commissioners Jung and Mogi, do you have additional questions or comments or thoughts? Nothing from Jordanek, nothing from Charles? Commissioner Mogi? Okay. Director Arntz, is there anything you would like to add at this point in the conversation? No. Okay. Can we go to public comment, please, Secretary Delgadillo?
Sure, I'm going to go ahead and unmute Matt Rowe. He was the first one to raise his hand. Okay, you have 3 minutes to comment.
Thanks. I'm also happy to go last if that was the preference of the commission.
Just to clarify, Mr. Rowe, you are from Voting Works, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Just so that's on the record. Why don't we, Secretary Delgadillo, if that's okay, could we get the other members of the public first?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. And thank you for
Okay.
holding, Mr. Rowe.
I will go ahead and unmute Alec Bash. You're unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Alec Bash, and I wanted to speak in support of the resolution. From a policy perspective, the city has been supporting open source voting systems for about 15 years now. And as someone who worked for the city and county of San Francisco for 30 years, I know the ins and outs of what can be done within city agencies, and working with the city attorney and the board of supervisors and commissioners and all else. But now, speaking as a member of the public, it seems like there has been a slow walking throughout all this time to respond to the policy objectives of the city. The resolution itself, as I look at what it says in the resolve clauses, there is nothing here that seems to breach anything that the city would think appropriate to do. I mean, I suppose in the final resolve clause, if you wanted to do wordsmithing, you could say to help ensure that regulations governing voting system pilot programs are adopted, as opposed to ensure, because certainly the commission cannot ensure and the city and county of San Francisco cannot ensure. But you can certainly be aspirational and do the best that you can to move this forward. And I really appreciate the comments of the commissioners to talk about ways in which this could be done, and we could go forward with this and keep the opportunity open for proceeding as quickly as possible. So I urge you to do that, to keep that optimistic point of view in mind. And if there's anything that the city attorney thinks by way of wordsmithing would help in this resolution to allay any of her concerns, certainly propose those words, but do not delay the resolution from being adopted. Thank you very much for your attention and for the work you do for the city and county of San Francisco, for its people, and for all voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bash.
Okay, we do have 3 more callers who would like to comment. First caller, I'm just going to go ahead and unmute you. All I see is a phone number. You're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Tim Soper. I have been behind or supporting open source since February 2005. And I've said this before the commission, but since some people are saying the public's not interested, I've been doing this for a long time, along with Mr. Bash and others. And I got into that when I learned that a programmer for Diebold was programming their machines. He had 23 felony convictions. And that said, then we got to look at the code. And I will add to that, when you go open source, that means the public can get access to the log files, the ballot images, the databases. All of this is kept from us. because it's proprietary. Now, we need to have open source so we can get to all of this. This is really, really important, and it's taking far too long, so I will urge the commission to expedite this as fast as reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soper.
I will go ahead and unmute the next caller. It's starts with a 15 number. Caller, you are unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name's Judith Reese, and I'm a voter in San Francisco, and I'm kind of concerned about this, and are you going to bring this to the voters? Are we going to have a chance to look at this before the next election? How are we going to make sure it's working? And I guess I just feel like this is being rushed, and I just really want to hear more and be able to engage more with this before you guys do anything. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Next caller. Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. Next caller is the number starts with a 6 and a 6. I don't see a name. You are unmuted and have 3 minutes to comment.
Hello again, commissioners. This is Brent Turner. I wanted to again thank everybody, and I understand there might be a feeling that this is overwhelming on certain levels, and I think that the voting works folks can probably explain it at a level that is understandable, but it is understandable that it would seem overwhelming. This is pioneering at the highest level for the sake of the national security, and we have to expedite, because to do otherwise would be detrimental to the best interests of not only the city and county, but the country. There's been tremendous blood shed over this particular issue of defending democracy, and you're right on the front line of doing the greatest work, and we want to applaud Commissioner Dragonic for leading what has been a people-led effort, because the government wasn't capable, unfortunately, of getting this job accomplished. We did a little bit in New Hampshire, but unfortunately Los Angeles failed, and then our attempt to build our own system in San Francisco didn't result. So now, luckily, a citizen-led effort, a nonprofit, has done the work for us and wants to gift us the answer to the national security crisis and provide solutions. So please understand the big picture here and move forward as soon as possible. Maybe new city attorney Chu, who is a major open source voting supporter, would like to come and speak about this in person as well. I think that would be great. And thank you all for your dedication to democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
There is another caller. The number starts with 7 and 3. You are unmuted and you have 3 minutes to comment.
Hello, Commission. This is Trent Lang, the president of the California Clean Money Campaign. Thank you very much for your long leadership on this really important issue for our democracy. As a reminder, we are the nonprofit organization that worked with then Assemblymember David Chu as an author on a bill to, along with a couple other Assembly members, to attempt to provide matching funds for San Francisco to develop their own open source system, which, as we know, would have cost, from previous estimates, could have cost up to $20 million, with some help from the state, but a lot from the county. So it is an incredibly amazing opportunity that you have here to accomplish your policy goals without having to wait years into millions of dollars that it would be otherwise for the county to develop the open source software on its own. So that's why this opportunity is so exciting, and I hope that you will move forward with it, regardless of whether, even if it's not guaranteed, the results and the time of the regulations. In terms of the regulations and the bills, our counsel, who has expertise in election law, when his reading of SB 360, the Section 19209 that has the enabling rules for the pilot project, makes clear that the regulations do have to be in place, but the voting system itself has to comply with those requirements of the regulations, but the plan does not have to be comply with that itself to be submitted. So this fits along with the timeline that we believe the Secretary of State in their letter was suggesting of going forward with the plans, providing them the information that they need. I was in on the conversations with the Secretary of State's office and Supervisor President Walton and Commissioner Jordanek when they discussed and they described how they would use this collaborative process that Commissioner Jordanek described, which would help inform them of the regulations. In terms of the regulations, the 45-day process, yes, it could take a year or so, but each wave of it only takes about the 45 days. Longer ones are more likely in case when there's regulations that are controversial, but if they're working with the county on those plans and on those procedures as they contemplate and as this letter contemplates, that should probably most likely minimize that process.
Mr. Lang, I'm sorry, we're hitting the end of the 3 minutes. I apologize.
Okay, so I'll just close with, hopefully you can do this resolution. As you said, there's no harm done, but it enables it. The one thing you might change in the finally resolved is maybe say, try to ensure regulations are adopted in time. That would, you can't guarantee that they're ensured, but if you add try to, then maybe that softens that and maybe addresses some commissioners' concerns there. But thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have Matt Rowe now. Matt, you are unmuted and you have 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, y'all. So first off, I want to agree with the previous caller, Trent Lang. My interpretation and the information that we have received from the Secretary of State's office is completely in line with his previous comment. We most recently from Voting Works met with Susan Lapsley, who is the Deputy Secretary of State and oversees voting system certification and the approval of a pilot program like this. It was very clear from that conversation that the Secretary of State's office has a shared interpretation that a pilot plan can be approved before regulations are drafted. The expectation from our conversation was that Voting Works in collaboration with John Arntz and the Elections Department would submit a plan, or rather the department would submit a plan, which, to be clear, is not defined in law at all. The only mention is a plan, where the only required documents from San Francisco would be the hardware, software, and firmware, and how it will be used and how it meets the legal requirements specified in the next steps of the SOS response. And then that is actually that document, the hardware, software, and firmware that will be used and how it meets the legal requirements, is exactly what we have drafted already in the pilot plan. This is also from the only precedent that has been set in this example from when LA County provided a similar request that was approved. This is the only documentation that was provided by LA County. We have already done that. We are also going to go a step further that was discussed in our conversation with Susan to produce the use procedures document to make it easier for the Secretary of State's office to understand what this is. That is how those two documents got mentioned in the Secretary of State's letter, that being the plan as we have already written it, as well as the use procedures document, which explains how our system works in more detail. I interpret that as synonymous with a plan. And as a result, that would be the expectation of the information we would submit to the Secretary of State's office to kick off this process. It was also stressed, similar to what Trent mentioned, that the goal of the Secretary of State's office is for this to be a collaborative process after we kick this off by submitting this documentation. In that San Francisco, Voting Works, and the Secretary of State's office would basically inform the regulations that are required in conversation and understanding once the Secretary of State's office has a clear understanding of what is being proposed. They want to understand what is being proposed beforehand.
I'm sorry, but you have 20 seconds.
Okay. I want to stress the only example that we have of this is that previous LA County example, and we already meet the sort of the permutations of a pilot plan using that example there. And that's why we want to go above and beyond by submitting these use procedure documents. And the last thing I'll mention is the worst case example here, where regulations do take a long time, where even though the Secretary of State's office has suggested that they want to collaborate with this and it will be an expeditious process, the worst case thing that happens is we run out of time, but we've de-risked this pilot plan so much that I don't see a negative impact on the city or county.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. And if you'll stay on the line,
Yes.
I think there may be additional questions for you. I have some, I don't know if other commissioners want to.
I just want to clarify that using Los Angeles as an example is not appropriate. The Los Angeles plan or whatever they did was not open source because they never disclosed their source at the end of the election. So that is not a project.
I am aware of that. It is the only example that we have of a pilot plan based off of Section 1909 being approved by the Secretary of State's office. And the information they submitted was the information that meets that first requirement in the Secretary of State's response, which is the, I'll just remember exactly verbatim. It says, a list of each piece of hardware, software, and firmware that will be used and how it complies with the requirements. That is the information that LA County submitted on the basis of Section 19209 authorizing this, and the Secretary of State's office did respond in approval of that. In our communication with the Secretary of State's office, they requested that we provide more documentation to make it easier for them to understand it, and that is how that is why they want to see the use procedure information.
Okay.
And just to clarify what use procedures are, because it wasn't obvious to me, what that basically is just a Secretary of State's office format of how the voting system works in a specific manner of documentation. It is effectively the manual for the voting system in a specific order.
So, Attorney Flores, do you have anything else on this to Mr. Rowe? No. Okay. A question to you, Mr. Rowe. The question I asked now about half an hour ago about whether or not the plan that's been being discussed between Voting Works and the department, you're saying is in fact synonymous with items A and B in the final paragraph from the Secretary of State.
Every signal that I have received from the Secretary of State, as well as the signal that I'd seen from a previous submission that was approved, suggests it is synonymous.
Okay, and thank you for that. And you are, what I heard from you just now confirms, and as well as the other members of the public, with the exception of one caller, that the submitting this documentation / plan continues to keep the door open. Everyone's sure there's no everyone is clear there's no guarantee, and that action alone is being taken with the aspiration that regulations would be written in time, that things could proceed. Everyone's aware that that might not happen. There's no guarantee there. But none of that actually involves or is even is not what the resolution is about. So again, we're talking about what might be submitted, not about the resolution. I'm just checking, correct? Because the resolution is about supporting President Walton and having the city work with the state, separate from submission of a plan or documentate, whatever we want to call it. I see Attorney Flores is nodding. So
Yes, the resolution is not about submitting a pilot project. It is about supporting President Walton's request for legislation regarding a pilot project.
right. So my question to Commissioner Jordanek is, it seems to me more important in the interest of keeping open the county's possibility of integrating open source software into one of our elections in the near term future. More important to focus on making sure that documentation and an outline is submitted, not on the resolution as drafted.
Well, so the thing is, for the city to submit the plan that contains those two things, there has to be, that can only be done once the board legislation passes. So President Walton's legislation, as he said in his comments, it's going to codify the submission of that plan. It basically, it's going to say something like, you know, the Department of Elections, you know, authorizes the Department of Elections to provide this information to the Secretary of State. So,
But I guess I've lost a sense of what we need this resolution for, because what we need is a plan.
well, I think, like someone said, I think it was Commissioner Jung that said earlier, like, technically we don't need to pass this resolution. I mean, I think things are going to move forward even if we don't act. But at the last meeting, I know Commissioner Mogi and I thought Commissioner Jung also, but said that they were interested in passing some kind of a resolution to support the effort. And it's more of like a moral support. You know, we're behind you. We agree with this, but it's not like, it's not the kind of thing where if we don't pass this resolution, things aren't going to happen. I mean, they're going to move forward either way.
Commissioner Mogi?
So I do understand that it's two separate things, and I hope that, you know, we can submit a plan. And separately, I think now the question at hand is about this resolution. I am supportive of the resolution while it doesn't, I think it is to just kind of state that, you know, if the Board of Supervisor does support this, then the commission also does support, you know, Supervisor Walton's legislation. The only odd thing is that we just haven't seen it. We just only read what he said in introduction. And so I know timing wise, it's a little bit unusual, but I don't think I think we've done more like dialogue and had many conversations about this that I trust that, you know, that his office would. I guess there's one question is, once it's introduced, you know, Commissioner Jordanek, will you make sure that it's, you know, letting us know that it's been introduced? I'm not introduced, but that legislation's, you know, drafted, and then maybe we can provide the feedback during, you know, whether, you know, I know there must be a time period where we could provide feedback to make sure that it is really genuinely aligned with the work that we're doing. I don't assume it's going to be so far from it, but I think that is one tiny hesitation, but I don't want that to stop us from showing our general support in pushing this forward. So in short, I am supportive of the resolution. I think that it does show, you know, more of like a collegiate kind of effort to make sure that this does move forward, whether it does or does not. But I do think that it is still a valuable step forward. So.
Yeah, so thank you very much for those comments, Commissioner Mogi. And you make a very good observation, and it's something that I crossed my mind too. Like, we haven't seen the legislation. I have been told by the Chief of Staff, Natalie G, that she would be looping me into the drafting process so that we can kind of look it over. But like one option to address that concern is in the first resolve clause where it says the commission supports President Walton's request for legislation to move the open source piloting process forward and encourages the Board of Supervisors to pass it. Like one option was we could just strike out the second part because we support his request in the abstract,
Yeah.
but we haven't seen the actual legislation.
Yeah.
So we can maybe hold off on encouraging people to pass it. And we could revisit it at the next meeting after we actually see the language. Or if people are comfortable, we could just encourage it now. But I think either way would be a good step forward. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I find that very helpful, both that exchange and all of the public input. My thoughts on this, as of this moment, are that while I'm not convinced this resolution is necessary, I think actually moving ahead with the documentation and an outline to the Secretary of State sends a very clear signal of intention. I'm not opposed to the resolution. I don't have a great confidence in its strategic value, but I don't see it as, a waste of time. I would agree with the amendment that you just suggested, Commissioner Judonic, that because we have not seen legislation, a resolution that says we support something that doesn't exist yet is problematic to me. So I would suggest striking that sentence. And I also find it, I would be more comfortable with the resolution, having listened to this conversation and also here reflecting on concerns expressed in the media, that it be a resolution in pursuit of open source voting, not in stated commitment or practice with any particular vendor, of which VotingWorks is, in my view, simply another vendor. And I understand the small size of the existing vendors of open source software, but my commitment is to open source software, not to any particular vendor. So my sense is that striking the second part of the sentence that begins on page 3, the first resolutions, to simply say request for legislation is supported, and striking any reference to a particular vendor, to make clear that what I understand this commission and this department to be committed to is pursuing open source solutions, not pursuing a relationship with any particular vendor. I don't know if others have other comments, thoughts on that amendment to the resolution. This is not yet a formal motion, but any further discussion? Commissioner Judonic.
So just to clarify on the part about mentioning VotingWorks, are you suggesting that, I think the way to do that, are you suggesting that we replace where it says VotingWorks with just open source voting in general? And then if it doesn't make sense, we just strike the whereas clause? Is that?
I would, I don't see the need for the whereas clauses that include reference to VotingWorks here.
Okay, let me just see.
I think it would be possible to strike whereas the San Francisco-based nonprofit, and then whereas on September 10th.
Yeah, let me just see how many whereas clauses are affected. It looks like there's 3.
Oh, I missed one then. Where's the third?
I mean, I'm fine with that if that's something that's important to you. I think that's fine.
I think my suggestion would be, if Commissioner Jordanic wants to work on this together for the next meeting, given that there is no current document of legislation that President Walton submitted. It's a request at this point. I think we still would have time, because in essence, what I'm hearing is that this would be a symbolic move in support. I believe that we still have time to get this in a way that all commissioners are comfortable moving forward in adopting.
Well, I would, I mean, if we have support today, I would prefer to do it today, just because I think it's going to have more impact if they hear from us earlier. But it's pretty much up to Commissioner Jung, I think, since I think Commissioner Mogi and President Bernholz both sort of said what they'd like to see changed.
Well, my view is aligned with President Bernholz almost exactly on this, which is I wouldn't describe this as a waste of time because it is, but it is symbolic. And if the others feel strongly about it, I wouldn't vote no. With some changes, including to that last sentence, which suggests that we have the power to ensure the Secretary of State does anything.
Okay.
So that's my view of it. But Commissioner Jordanek, you appear to be feel strongly about pushing this forward. So, and
So okay. So thank you. So maybe what I do is just restate the amendments that I've heard from people, and then if there's anything else, then people could mention that. But I'm hearing to strike the whereas the San Francisco-based nonprofit Voting Works whereas clause, strike the whereas Voting Works wrote a letter, strike the whereas in response to feedback from Director Arntz.
Yep.
Okay, and then we basically delete the and encourages the Board of Supervisors to pass it. We're just supporting the request at this point.
Correct.
An amendment is needed on the whereas line 17, page 2. It is incorrectly stating what the Secretary of State has begun doing. They did not state that they have begun the process of creating regulations. They simply stated the process for creating regulations, but they did not commit to a start date.
I completely agree with that. And in addition, the second clause of that same sentence, I think, is also incorrect. It says outlining the information that San Francisco should provide. I mean, that suggests that the Secretary of State is taking a position one way or the other. I don't think it is.
Well, how about if we just do this? What if we just strike it completely? Then we don't have to worry about that whereas clause. It's just background. So strike the whereas clause where we say the Secretary of State replied, and then strike the and encourages the Board of Supervisors to pass it, and then in the finally resolved, I was hearing that from people to change to ensure that regulations to either to help ensure.
Yeah, or to try to ensure.
Or replacing ensure with encourage.
Yeah, either any of those. Your preference, or
that's what I would prefer.
To
encourage.
Okay, to encourage that regulations. All right. Okay, are there any other were there any other things that people noticed? Okay, then
Is that so? Are you making a motion on this resolution as amended?
Yeah, unless someone else wants to.
I will move that the commission approve the resolution presented by Commissioner Jordanek as amended and noted in the minutes of this meeting to support President Walton's request for legislation and to encourage the Secretary of State to put in place the necessary regulations. Can I get a second? Was that a second, Commissioner? I'm sorry, I spoke over you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I fear that I have gone out of order here, and now that there is a motion on the table, do we need public comment again? No? Okay. No, okay. So there's a motion and a second. Secretary Delgadillo, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Sure. President Bernholz, how do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Vice President Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Mogi,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jordanic.
Yes.
With 4 in the affirmative, it passes.
Great. Thank you to all commissioners, Commissioner Jordanic, and to the members of the public. Next item on the agenda, number 6, remote ballot completion and submission for people with access and functional needs project. Discussion and possible action regarding the remote ballot completion and submission for people with access and functional needs project, for which San Francisco issued a RFP in April of 2021. There are several attachments here. Let me just check the website to see if there were any new ones added. Of course, I can't do that very quickly. No, the attachments here are the memo from Commissioner Jordanic, a grant proposal project narrative, remote ballot project RFP, and a letter regarding this that was added on November 16th. So there's an additional letter for people's perusal. Commissioner Jordanic, thank you for your attention to this issue. I know this was discussed at the October meeting at which I was, from which I was absent. I want to thank everyone for trying to wade our way through yet another complicated set of multi-layered public agency decision-making. I have asked Director Arntz to help clarify, as from his perspective, which I understood from my own reading and review of the materials, to have come at a what I describe personally as a surprisingly late in the process engagement in a set of activities led mostly by other city and federal government agencies. If he could help us sort of clarify the timeline going on here, what's been decided by whom, where we are in this process, and if there are reasons for the commission to inquire further into the use of these funds. So Director Arntz, if you're able to help get us started. And I want to also acknowledge that Commissioner Jordanic's memo outlines a timeline from his perspective, but there are several city departments and the federal agency involved in this, and it's impossible that some of this is well beyond the remit of this commission. I'm trying to figure out what's within our remit, and that other people may be necessary to fully inform all of us what's happening here, where it stands, and who the decision makers are. So, Director Arntz.
All right, thank you, President Bernholz. So I actually didn't develop a timeline, but I've got a storyline that indicates how I understand the sequence of activity, because I was not personally involved in a lot of these actions. And I also want to make a statement that I asserted last meeting. No one's developing an internet blockchain voting system. It's just not happening. It's just nobody's doing that. And I know that's the assertion with these materials, but that's not the case. And this whole idea with the identity management system came from meetings that I had with my voting accessibility advisory committee, and also independently with Nicole Bond, who's the director of the Mayor's Office on Disability. And the meetings I had with Director Bond also included a few times Director Jarrell from the Department of Technology. And Director Bond's perspective was, the city's putting so much attention into trying to develop an open source voting system, but the city is not doing anything for people with disabilities. And I recall she actually went to a commission meeting and made that statement. And it was before the pandemic. It was, I don't remember the date. And she was told essentially what I'm seeing in this letter that was added to this agenda, that well you can have emergency, you can have a curbside voting, you can have you can vote at home with a vote by mail ballot, and then you could even vote with the remote accessible system. And that's sort of like a pro forma response to people with disabilities, because people who have motion disability, or if they have sight disabilities, or they're blind, even with the remote accessible vote by mail program that provided a PDF of a ballot, they can use assistive tools to navigate and vote that ballot. But like I said last meeting, they still have to print that ballot out. A lot of folks don't have printers. They don't, and that's been an issue that we've been trying to deal with for several years actually. How can we get people access to printers so they can print out their ballots? But that means they actually have to leave their voting session essentially in their residence, go to a library or whatever, get their ballot printed, and then they have to put an envelope, either the envelope that we supplied with the vote by mail ballot or an envelope of their own. And these steps require people to help them, especially people who are blind. And and people with mobility issues as well. They potentially can't manipulate the ballot pen. They can't manipulate even their screen sometimes. So Nicole's request, and it also came formally through the Disability Council, which was a letter that was included in Commissioner Jarnock's packet from last session. They formally requested the city to do something to increase accessibility for people who could not vote independently and privately with current systems. And that's the genesis for all of this. And those initial meetings, blockchain was mentioned as a way for people to potentially give ballots to the department, but that wasn't the solution that was focused on. The issue, we were more focused on the issue, and the issue was, how do people return their ballots to the department once they vote them? Because even if you have a mobility disability, potentially getting that ballot back in the envelope is going to be a challenge for you. Someone who's blind is on a printer. So like, what are the methods we could do? So yeah, blockchain was mentioned, but it wasn't ever decided upon as the way that we're going to develop a system. And then also, people potentially can't sign their envelopes. So it's a necessity that people sign their envelopes if they're voting at home to get the ballots back to the department. So what kind of solutions can we think of there? And that's really how all this started. Then later on, I think just before the pandemic, some folks from the Department of Technology were speaking with people from this what's this group? What's the name of it? I forgot. I'm sorry. The federal group. This
UASI.
UASI.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a formal request on the city's part. This UASI was asking people from Department of Technology if there were any projects or any concerns or any issues that need resolving around cybersecurity, access to voting, and things of that nature. And they happened to mention these conversations with people with disabilities and the mayor's office on disability, and also the mayor's disability council. And UASI, independently, without the Department of Technology formally requesting, informally requesting, without me doing anything, without our knowledge even, progressing to issue this RFP for this regional group that I think it's like 12 counties and 4 cities or something like that, to find solutions for people with disabilities that were independent of any voting system. So so UASI and us, we were not thinking of anything specific to the Dominion system. We're not thinking of anything specific to anyone else's system. And we also made it a point that whatever tools that were made, to the extent possible, they included open source software. And that's all has been communicated, amongst ourselves. And UASI also picked up on this. And then UASI's process there's Coit. So Coit, I don't think had any input at all with UASI's grant, because UASI is a separate entity. It's a federal entity. So there's no city action that was directing UASI, that was commenting on UASI's actions. It's something that UASI took up on their own, and they followed through on. And there has been an RFP issued. Oh, another question that Commissioner Jarnock had was if the city had any sort of hearings or any review of these grants. My understanding is that the city, they approve the bulk grants coming in for UASI related projects that would apply to the city, but there's no review of independent projects within the UASI envelope, because UASI is a federal agency undertaking its own actions separate from anything that the city's doing. And I didn't know that $1.5 million had been organized by UASI. The Department of Technology didn't know that $1.5 million had been organized by UASI. And UASI did issue an RFP for a contractor. They did select a contractor. Its name is 21Tech/XTech. It's a vendor that works with the city, and they provide, I think, programming and technology services to the city. The contract's not final yet, but they're nearing completion. But again, this whole situation, and no one is seeking to develop an internet blockchain voting system. People are trying to think, are there ways that we can make voting more accessible for people so they can vote independently and privately without needing assistance from somebody? And that's always the weak point for people when it comes to voting with disabilities. Too often they have to ask someone, be it a poll worker, be it someone in their home, be it someone in a library if they want to print, someone in the department, to help them vote. And they, every time it's brought up that they want to vote independently and privately, they're never really given, in their minds, they're not given the tools or the attention to develop the tools to actually complete the process in a manner they think that is their right. And I'll say too, though, and I'm gonna say this not to promote blockchain internet voting or anything, but if you mention to people, and I have many times, that the state law just allows voting using the internet to vote. There's a commission policy against internet voting. A lot of times the response from someone with disabilities is, I don't care. I don't care what the law is. I don't care what the policy is. I want solutions. And if there's a solution out there, I don't want some law or some policy to stop me from having that solution. And so there's a different perspective from people than what we normally experience in these commission meetings, and also what we experience when we look through the laws and regulations and policies around voting in California and San Francisco specifically. So that's where things are. And I didn't have time. I didn't really realize these questions were part of the agenda until this week. So Director Durrell, she said she couldn't make today's meeting. She offered to come to the December meeting. Director Bond, she's on leave right now. I'm hoping she'll be back from leave in time for the next commission meeting. I'll invite her also to the meeting. Then also the members of our Voting Accessibility Advisory Committee, I'll ask them if they want to attend the meeting. And then you can ask them questions as well about all this and have their perspective. But I'll tell you, none of those people I just named do anything about this UASI grant. At one point, they didn't know anything about the amount that was included in the UASI grant, the reason for the amount. But the folks that I just mentioned, we all do want to find some way to find tools or solutions for people with disabilities. And that's the purpose of all this. That's what's going on. And so really I'll say it, just to frame this as the department or the city seeking to develop an internet blockchain voting system and assert that positively is just wrong. It's an inaccurate assessment. It is inaccurate assertion. No one's ever thought about that. Blockchain was mentioned as a possible solution. It was never like the committed solution to create these tools. So I'll ask other folks if they want to attend the next commission meeting, and we can go over this, and you can get their perspective as well, separate from anything that I'm saying. So.
Thank you, Director Arns. And I want to actually pull out from what you've said and stick a pin in for this commission in general that I believe the Elections Commission should do everything we can to support the department in enabling all voters, including people with disabilities, to exercise their right to vote. Absolutely, that should be a priority. And one of the things I'm taking away from your comments, Director Arntz, and my 15th review of these materials is that there is a concern out there that we're not doing enough. And I think we should address that. Absolutely. Because it's our responsibility to make sure that all qualified voters can vote. That being said, and thank you also for reaching out to your fellow department heads about the possibility of them joining us. It's possible we will need to do that. We may also want to call the UASI people to help us explain where this is. But I'm trying to find, and this may shift from you, Director Arntz, to Commissioner Jordanek, where, given the number of different agencies involved with this, I guess my question to you, Director Arntz, has there been other situations in which other departments, either at the city county level or the federal government level, have gone as far down a process in building election related technology that's engaged your expertise so late in the process, or is this unusual in just that regard?
Oh, this whole situation's unusual, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, and to have the federal government, like a federal agency, independently take these steps, I've never experienced anything like this before.
Okay. And at the current moment, is there, as far as you know, and I'm recognizing that communication is clearly part of the problem here, is there activities underway with UASI or the Department of Technology in this RFP that you're expected to be participating in, that the department is actively engaged in?
Actively, right now, no. I'm not engaged at all in this process. I did get a contact. I think it was actually in Commissioner Jordanek's materials too. The person who leads the UASI. I remember I got her email, and she wanted folks from our VAC meeting to have their contact information, so that when UASI started whatever work they did, the Voting Assessment Advisory Committee or VAC participants could give their input to any development. I've not been asked to provide anything to UASI.
Oh.
I've not been engaged with them other than that.
Okay, so just to play that back again, they've asked you to connect them to the VAC, but not, okay.
Right.
And does anybody know, this is to Director Arntz and City Attorney and all the commissioners, if they're reaching out? I understand that the monies are being, San Francisco is the fiscal agent for the money, but there's 13 other counties involved. Does anyone know the status of those departments of elections and these conversations?
Not at all. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Any commissioners who want to understand this and jump in with questions? Commissioner Jordanek.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Director Arntz, for sharing what you know about the project. And just, I mean, to me, there's sort of two issues here. One is there's the substance of the project, which is what it's doing, and then there's also, you know, how we heard about it or didn't hear about it. And I'd rather kind of focus on the second part a little bit, just because the thing is, I think if we had heard about it, then we would have been able to have a discussion, sort of like kind of a normal type of discussion about it. But I mean, just to kind of like, just in a nutshell, like just a month ago, we were having this discussion about this blockchain voting project, and then I was under the impression that this was a $120,000 project, and then after that meeting, I learned that there was actually a $1.5 million project. So I guess one of the first things I want to understand is, like, how is that possible? Like, did you not know about the RFP before the meeting last month, or Director Arntz?
I didn't know the dollar amount. I knew that an RFP had been issued for for a contractor, but I had no idea it was for $1.5 million project.
Yeah, so then I guess to me there's something missing from the city's process if they would go forward with a project that's so heavily tied into elections without letting the director know about it, because the Department of Elections is named in the RFP as a collaborator on the project. And if you look at the RFP, it actually spells out it is about internet voting. That is one part of it. And one of the minimum qualifications does have to do with blockchain. So I feel like there's this massive project happening and you weren't really looped in. We weren't really looped in. And it seems like the Board of Supervisors passed this without even really knowing what they were voting for, because I guess you said it wasn't listed there. So, and I'll kind of narrow in on just a couple more things about the transparency. So this RFP went out last April and it was posted for a month. And I remember back in 2019, the commission did a lot of work we were collecting the names and email addresses of people that were interested in open source voting. And we were collecting these names for the director of the Department of Technology so she could let these people know whenever there was an opportunity that was related to open source voting. And this project, this UASI project, it's being co-managed by the Department of Technology and someone within UASI. And I did have a phone conversation with the people at UASI about this. So they're co-managing it, and it's being labeled as under the open source voting category in COIT. And yet no one on that list was notified of this RFP back in April. And I can't tell if there was any outreach about the RFP. And these are people that have like expertise in security, expertise in open source voting. And then I also actually called up someone who actually bid on this contract to see if how they found out about the RFP. And they said they just found out about it by accident. They were just surfing the web one night and they came across the posting. So it's not just that we weren't notified of the project. It also seems like when they were doing the RFP, they didn't really do any kind of outreach to like let people know, hey, this is something that the city is building. And also the project is it's not just like a consultant, it's a whole development shop to design, develop, and pilot the system for 1,000 voters across these 12 counties. And so, I mean, these are the kinds of like, I don't know how to say it, like alarm bells or something that were going off when I was learning more about this. And I just feel like it has to have some kind of a wider discussion. And I'm hoping that the contract negotiations can be put on pause until there's a chance to actually have a conversation about the substance of it, because that's kind of a whole nother thing as to how is this even useful if it's, because I totally want to increase the accessibility of the voting experience, but my understanding is that what they're developing is not even something that can be used in California. So then what is the purpose of it? How does it actually help anyone to build something that is not even allowed to be used? So these are some of the kinds of questions that I was asking myself as I learned more about this stuff.
Well, it's not just what, I mean, an RFP, I understand that the federal agency has its own process separate from DT. So even though you provided contacts to DT, it doesn't necessarily mean that the federal agency asked DT for contacts in relation to issuing an RFP.
Well, the RFP was posted on the city's website, though. I mean,
but again, it's a federal agency. I mean, my understanding is they issued the RFP. DT didn't issue the RFP.
So they just served as a place to post it, you're saying?
Well, I think that what I understand is that the Department of Emergency Management is the city agency that is a conduit or the placeholder, however you say it,
Yeah.
or any monies coming for city-related or city purpose services from this UOSI. So it's probably on the, I would imagine it was the RFP, if it's on a city site, it must have come through the Department of Emergency Management, but it was still UOSI that issued the RFP. That's how I understand the process works. It's not a DT, Department of Technology RFP. So they weren't brought into the process. They weren't asked about advertising. They weren't asked about contacts. And then also, I haven't read the RFP, Commissioner Jarnik, so I don't know what's in there, but you know, I did read through your questions before the meeting, and you know, like I said at the beginning, no one's, from my perspective, no one's focused on any specific method to resolve an issue. But there's multiple issues, and the purpose, to my mind, of this RFP is to potentially solve multiple issues that people with disabilities face. One is they're like how signing the envelope. Is there a way that technology can help them digitally to sign an envelope without actually having to use a pen or a pencil, for instance? But also the delivery of the ballot is also an issue for people. I've already outlined that. And so if someone's thinking about an RFP who's not involved in elections, again, this is speculation on my part, I'm not speaking for anybody. It would seem to me, it makes sense that they would think internet, emailing it, and then potentially blockchain, which I can't speak to blockchain. But really the issue is the delivery of the ballot. Be it someone voting on their phone or somehow getting the ballot on their phone and bringing that phone to the Department of Elections that we printed out. I don't know. You know, do we provide printers? I don't know. But the voting of the ballot, the signing of the envelope, and the delivery of the ballot, those are the issues. The methods of how to get there, those have not been resolved yet. And I don't really want to stop the project. That's why I'd like for hopefully Director Bond and the VAC members can come. You can get their perspective as well. But again, I didn't know it was 1.5. My sense is that DT didn't realize it was 1.5 until later in the process. When I was answering questions last month, all I had were the $120,000, whatever the number was. But again, I understand you're concerned about the process, or you have concerns, you have questions, but ultimately what this is about is trying to support people with disabilities in voting independently and privately. So
I'll just ask a couple more things. So in terms of how involved was the Department of Technology with the RFP, I know, for example, that the person that was one of the screeners for the bids, they were a Department of Technology, or the screener for minimum qualifications. They were a Department of Technology employee that had worked with the winning bidder. And the one of the people on the evaluation panel, one of the three people, was the Department of Technology's CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. So it seems like they are, they must have known about the dollar amount. But the other thing that's kind of weird to me is, at the last meeting you said that $70,000 is going from this grant to the Department of Technology. Is that right? From the grant?
Yes, I think it's 70. Yeah.
Yeah. So I asked the people that are managing the UOSI grant, and they said they don't know about that money. Like, they said they didn't know that any money is going to the Department of Technology.
And that's on DT side. So anything that DT would do, potentially they would use that $70,000.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is, how did they? Why did they get $70,000 from the? If it's.
My understanding is that $70,000 was money that the Department of Technology already had from the previous open source voting efforts that's available for, that wasn't taken back. Again, apologies if that's the wrong language, when budget when the mayor's office required departments to return all money, that was the funding that the Department of Technology already had for remote accessible ballot marking.
Well, no, there was.
And that the $1.5 million total, I don't know why people don't know that number. From what I see here, I don't even know where the money is coming from, but it's because it's now not a San Francisco County thing, it's a 14 county thing.
Well, so it's being co-led by the San Francisco Department of Technology, but at the last meeting, it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Arntz, but you said it was 50,000 was left over from the open source voting project. And then the other 70,000 of the 120,000 came from the grant.
That was, yeah, that's what I thought actually when I said that, but I was wrong. So there's $70,000 and the remaining open source original allocation for open source was moved over to DT, or DT has it essentially. We didn't move it over there. It was already there. And so again, one of the purposes of this project would be to develop anything using open source. And so that's the reasoning that anything on DT side that they would put towards this would be towards an open source tool. I don't have the specific use for that money. And then also for the timing, I mean, hopefully Director Drell can attend the next month's meeting if it's necessary. She can talk about the timing as far as she knew. Because I did speak to her before last meeting, and I don't think she was fully aware of the steps involved in the time frame. But I don't. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm learning from meeting to commission meeting about this UASI project and the funding. I wasn't not telling the commission something last meeting, and I'm not trying to not say something now.
Okay, because another thing that was caught my eye is that when I was reading the documentation, it referenced that one of the vendors that bid they worked together with the Department of Technology on a prototype of the project that the RFP is about. And so I was wondering, what is that prototype and why did we never hear about it? And how is that prototype? I mean, what is the prototype? And
I'm not aware of any prototype.
Yeah, so what I was reading is that it's talking about a prototype that was developed with the department. I mean, this is just another example of something that it doesn't make sense, or something is not being made public and around this.
Or that what appears in writing is more concrete than what's actually happening. And I say that only because, and here I'm operating from memory on the commission, when the pandemic hit and monies were requested back, when we were in the final stages pre-pandemic of discussing the available budget for open source, that there was these funds remaining at the Department of Technology, that the idea on the table from Director Jarrell and the Department of Elections was that we should think about what we could do on risk limiting audits and remote accessible ballot marking devices. And that's what's being described as previous work with the department on a prototype may refer to that. Again, I'm speculating here, but it still sounds to me like there's a lot of interagency coordination and communication that's not great. But that's, and the question I guess I have is, what does this commission feel it needs to know, and when, and from whom, in order to ensure that our responsibility to the voters and to the law of as written now, is being met. And I may be out of my depth here. I'll give DCA Flores a heads up. I don't know that is the Elections Commission, if we have any authority to go ask either the people at UASI, or I know we have the authority to invite Director Jarrell to our meetings, but I want to be clear that there's an awful lot of other departments in the mix here, and I don't know where our authority ends. So that's back to you, Chris. Again, on that level of question about the vendor and the prototype and the status,
Yeah.
It seems to me that is a question either for UASI or the Department of Technology.
Right, and the thing is, I don't think we're actually the right body to be having a hearing about this project, because none of these people that are involved in the project report to us. We don't have any authority over them. We don't have the bandwidth or the expertise. But I feel strongly that we should have at least been informed about it, especially because, Director Jarrell knows we're interested in this stuff. It was categorized as open source voting, and she knows how to get in touch with us.
Okay.
But if I was to suggest that we do something, I would like it if we could ask the Board of Supervisors to hold a hearing about it, for that reason.
For the reason that it involves election.
Well, people that don't report to us, that we don't have any oversight over, and
I see.
we don't have the bandwidth or the expertise.
Okay. Okay. Any thoughts or comments from other commissioners? And thank you, Director Arns, for going through this again.
And I do have a question, Commissioner Jordanek. What's the outcome there? So what do you hope to achieve out of this request to the Board of Supervisors?
I would basically, so that we can get the information, and just so people can have an understanding of what is this project, what is the goal, where did it come from, just really the basics. Because right now, it seems like this project came so far, and no one really knew or really appreciated what was happening. I mean, even our own director didn't know about it. And to me, that's like, raises a flag, I think.
Does the Department of Election, I'm sorry, the Elections Commission have the authority to request the Board of Supervisors to take such action? Recognizing that even if we have the authority, they could say no, but I'm not even sure if we can ask for that.
I mean, anyone could ask the board to hold a hearing.
Okay.
You could just say no.
Right.
So
Okay.
I've been like trying to follow. It's been very hard. It does feel like it's genuinely like there's multiple agencies. There, like President Bernald said, there's probably definitely like a miscommunication amongst different agencies, and we just don't have that type of authority. And I understand that there are some concerns on our ends of when it comes to the, if there is some type of implementation or outcome, and if it is categorized as open source voting, it's all a little confusing to me. And we're not the ones that issued the RFP, so I actually think that's probably the more reasonable route if it's something that, because it's just really out of our realm of work. And so I've been just kind of trying to follow along of like, where does this really, it does fit, I think, but I think what Commissioner Jordanek is saying is like, we don't want it to be like after the fact. And it's just a bunch of, there's still even confusion after.
Yep.
And so I mean, I don't know what the process is per se to request. I guess it would just to see if someone would sponsor a hearing, but I don't, maybe President Walton, I have no idea. That's just because of our previous item. And so I would just, I just don't think I don't know even if they come to our hearing, like Director Jerome.
Right.
I mean, it might be helpful, but I mean, what does that really do? It might as
Yeah.
well just go, we can all participate and hear it in the hearing if there is one elsewhere. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Mogi. So I'm hearing that as approaching support for the idea that this commission would request the Board of Supervisors to hold a hearing on the status and the issuance and status of this RFP.
Let me
Yeah, or-
suggest a couple of alternatives, which might be worse, but I'll just throw them out there because they occur to me.
Give us your bad ideas first. No, I'm kidding.
All right,
I'm
let me
sorry, I've been
give you the
standing on
worst.
the
Let me give you the worst idea first, then, in that order. But you know, one thing that occurs to me is that maybe you know, San Francisco has a very expansive civil grand jury that's you know, as a surprise to us, looked into certain things within the realm of this commission, investigated them, drew resources in, apparently called witnesses maybe, and then produced a recommendation. You know, maybe this would be a topic, something we refer to them. Also, seems to me that if you, while the Board of Supervisors maybe has the jurisdictional reach to hold a hearing, you know, kind of query whether what the result of such a thing would be. You know, what real learnings, you know, might come out of that, what you know, what would be tangibly applied. So wondering if there's something akin to kind of the interdepartment inspector general type of role. You know, also seems like something that the city attorney's office, you know, might, you know, we as a city attorney for so many things, you know, probably way too many things that we should know about in the first instance. But you know, this does seem like one area where maybe the city, you know, something the city attorney might want to investigate. So just a couple of options out there. I don't know which was the, you know, kind of more foolish option first, but those are the two ideas.
Thank you for those options.
Can I add
Deputy
a
City Chief- Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Mogi.
just like one just one I mean I do think that we should take I really, because you know, even from the public, we heard it from the last meeting, there are just genuine concerns, and I do think we need to take some kind of action. I'm open to any after we get some advice from maybe, or some thoughts from the deputy city attorney, but I do think it's important enough, and whether or not then, you know, let's say we go through the hearing route and the board says no, I do think that, you know, we still have to take some kind of action. So I'll just kind of voice that out loud because I hear that it's been a concern, and from, you know, a number of people from the public, so.
Okay, great. So Deputy City Attorney Flores, where do we
Yes.
go from here?
So I think the best course is to ask the Department of Emergency Management and any other department that you think you want to hear from, to ask them to attend our next commission meeting and discuss this contract and this, you know, and these matters before calling on the board to do anything. I think we should invite the partners that are actually involved in this contract and who put out this RFP and who are involved in this OASI work to come and talk to us about it. I think that is within what the commission is, you know, allowed to do, which is set general policies for the Department of Elections and is responsible for the proper administration of the department. You know, I don't think that we have the power to cancel this contract that the commission has the power to do that. So my recommendation is at the next meeting, the commission invite these people that may have some more answers for you and then proceed with whatever option you want to go at that point.
Would we be able to call the federal agency?
I'd have to research that, but you can call anyone that you'd like to hear from. Are they going to respond and attend? I don't know that they have a duty to, especially because the contract is not necessarily with the Department of Elections, as I understand it.
It appears not to be. Yeah. Yeah. So hearing that, that we have the authority to invite anyone we want, we can't be guaranteed they'd come. There's several options on the table, asking the board to do this, passing it on to the civil grand jury, or if I understood your last in order suggestion, VP Jung, was to have the city attorney's office do some sort of investigation, but I'm not sure how that works. Those are several options, and it does seem as if there's loose consensus that there's enough lack of clarity here that taking some action is appropriate. Am I reading the room correctly? Okay. Okay. Director Ernst, is there anything else you want to add? Just thinking about how we might proceed here?
As far as your actions are concerned, I mean, I think invite Director Jarrell to December's. Ideally, I would also like to have the Director Bond if she's available.
Yes.
I don't want to get lost in process of other agencies to lose sight of the reason why this conversation is even happening. I mean, we are trying to find solutions for people with disabilities. So I don't want that to be lost. And I also ideally have the VAC members available if they want to participate. We can ask the Department of Emergency Management if there's anyone that they could send to the meeting. Because at least they have an association with this UASI, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then ask UASI as well. I mean, I think to me that's a better route than.
So the groups just listed, Emergency Management, UASI, the Department of Technology, the Office of Disability, and the VAC.
Right.
Okay.
Is this our December holiday party?
Yeah, exactly. Cancel your plans. Commissioner Jordanic, I saw your hand.
I mean, I see the reason why we might want to learn more, directly, but I still feel like it was never our job to approve the funding for this project. This was ultimately the Board of Supervisors. And I listened to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting where they discussed this project. And I tell you, it was like 30 or 45 second summary of what this $32 million was for. And I mean, yeah, we could kind of do our own investigation, but I just question whether it's really gonna, if we're really the right people to do it.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Jordanic.
Yeah, so do I,
point.
actually. Okay, there's no motion yet on the floor. Would you like to hear from the public first, or is anyone ready to make such a motion? Public?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
And that way the public can weigh in on the motion.
Thank you.
The motion is to, authorize our president or president's designee to draft a letter to the Board of Supervisor outlining the concerns reflected in Commissioner Jordanic's memo and recommending a hearing or an investigation take place.
Great. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Let's go to public comment then.
Okay, we have three commenters. I will go ahead and unmute the first one. Caller, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, commissioners. Thank you again for your great attention to detail here. Brent Turner, speaking understanding and basically uncovering a lot of this information. Of course, we want to know more. Transparency is key, and there's an irony involved here since many of us are advocating for transparency and then running into this issue. I will say from personal experience, to speak in sort of a street language, there are basically crews of technologists that take advantage of the government's lack of clear understanding on some of these technology issues. And so watching where this money goes, one must understand when the initial HAVA funds were released of $4.5 billion, those monies were very poorly spent. There's a tremendous amount of waste in this space. And folks in the software space and in other technology spaces take advantage of government. And so this is important that we have a tremendous amount of transparency. We saw $300 million go down the drain in Los Angeles, and that was announced as an open source project, which it wasn't. We've seen it time and time again where there's drift built in. And so unless we really nail these situations down, I think we're going to run into these problems. And you would think that these wise guys would not be so much involved when it comes to election security and these kinds of issues, but they're not. They're undaunted by that. They go right into attack mode, even though we're talking about the very heart of our democracy. So again, we applaud your efforts here and we support that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Okay, we do have Mr. Jefferson on the line also. I will unmute you now. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you very much, commissioners. I appreciate your opening this hearing to the public. I want to talk about the rights of voters with disabilities a little bit. Everyone, literally everyone, is in favor of opening options for voters with disabilities. And I've been working in this area for 20 years now, and there's nobody opposes it. The problem always comes down to proposals to implement solutions for voters with disabilities based on internet voting. It always comes down to this. I've been all over the country testifying and writing and discussing this, and inevitably it comes down to that. So you can be sure that this subject of internet voting will be at the center of whatever this multi-state, multi-county contract is about. And unfortunately, I understand the attitude that Mr. Arntz mentioned of that the disabled voters often cite, which is we don't care what the law says. And to be charitable about it, I understand that's a way of saying, well, we would like the law to be changed. However, the law is the way it is for a very good reason, which is that there are profoundly unsolvable security problems with any form of internet voting. And unfortunately, the disability advocates have never really understood that. And in some cases, they don't care about that. And this is where I think we have to draw the line. I'm willing to do and support anything to make it easier for the disabled voters to vote, except internet voting. We just have to draw the line against that. That's a national security catastrophe in the making. And what I would suggest, in addition to passing the resolution that's on the table here, that you, the Elections Commission, might consider reaffirming your 2017 resolution in opposition to internet voting, and just add, we reaffirm it even in the case of voting for disabled voters and military voters and any other group of voters who feel that internet voting is part of their agenda. So thank you for for listening to me, and I'll look forward to following this issue in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jefferson.
Okay, we do have one more caller. I will unmute you now, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Barbara Simons. I lived in San Francisco. I'm on the board of advisors of the U.S. Election Assistance Commissions. I've been there since 2008 when I was first appointed by Senator Reid, and I've been reappointed, including now most recently by Senator Schumer. And I agree with everything that Dr. Jefferson just said. We all want to make voting as easy and accessible as possible for voters with disabilities. But we are not doing them any favor by giving them an insecure voting system to vote on. Back in 2001, Dr. Jefferson and I were both on a workshop on internet voting, which was convened by President Clinton. The National Research, the NSF ran this workshop, and this was a workshop of election officials, computer scientists, and other experts, and the conclusion was internet voting is too insecure. This was in 2001. This was way before ransomware, way before attacks on the federal government agencies. Most recently, the FBI was hacked. Way before major corporations were hacked. It's only gotten worse. And one question I would hope that the Commission will consider, and that the Board of Supervisors will as well, is what would you do if 6 months after an election you learned that the election had been hacked? Because with internet voting, anyone from anywhere can attack the election. And don't forget, we have Russia. We know that Russia has been attacking our elections. Anyone from anywhere can attack. What if you learn that the system has been hacked and the wrong people were declared the winners? If something like that were to happen, it's going to make the Stop the Steal claims, it's going to make what happened in 2020 and 21 just look like a joke. I mean, like nothing, because the whole country will be up in arms. Or in this case, if it's a city, the whole city will be up in arms, because there is no legal recourse, none. So we are not doing them any favor. We're not doing anybody any favor by providing an insecure system. There's no way that local election officials can protect their systems against threats from major from countries who have far more resources at their disposal than we have. And so I have two requests. One, I completely agree with the proposal that's been made that the request should go to hold hearings for the Board of Supervisors. I would also request that the Board of Supervisors explicitly be asked to delay the contract negotiations until after they have heard from outside independent cybersecurity experts, because as David Jefferson just said, we are talking about internet voting. Internet voting is a cybersecurity issue. It's a national security issue. The Greater Bay Area
we have 10 seconds left.
The Greater Bay Area is full of experts. You should be bringing them in to testify. Thank you very much.
Dr. Simons, if you're still there, you had
Yes,
two
ma'am.
requests, and I would ask you for your second request, thus granting you additional time.
Well, thank you very much. That's to hold hearings where you bring in
Okay.
independent cybersecurity experts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have the two requests. Thank you very much, Dr. Simons. Is there any other public comment?
I actually don't see any other hands raised. I had to lower all the hands at once because as persons are commenting, they're not lowering their hand. So it's hard for me to tell if it's a new hand or someone who's already commented. I lowered them all.
All right, let me just ask then again, if there's anyone out there in the public who wants to comment on this issue, please call back in. If not, just wait a second, see if anybody, I have no idea if anyone was cut off, and I don't want to make that happen. Oh, I don't see anything there. Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Thank you.
I'm sorry, President Bernholz. I would just strongly urge the Commission to hold its own hearing first on this before asking the Board of Supervisors to hold a hearing about this, because ultimately the board's response may be, why didn't the Commission hold a hearing about this before coming to us? The other thing, you have to remember is that The board has a very limited schedule in the next few weeks because of the holidays. And so I think that the best alternative or the best course here is for the commission to hold their own hearing, to get concrete demands or to get a concrete idea of how to move forward in this, and not just use the board as a fact-finding, place.
Commissioner Jordanek, and somebody is going in and out of the public comment area, just to note that. Keep an eye on that. Commissioner Jordanek, thank you, Attorney Flores.
So one of the issues is something that the last commenter raised, is that there's a timing issue here where they're in the contract negotiations right now, and they may sign that in the next month. And if we have our own hearing in a month, and then it's going to be kind of like an after the fact thing. But if we wanted the contract negotiations to be paused while there's an adequate chance for the public to find out about it, then I think that's something that really only the supervisors can do. So I would.
So ultimately, it is up to a department to pause or cancel or rescind their own contracts. So I just want to, let you know that this contract, the holders of the privilege to pause, cancel, or do anything with the contract are ultimately the contracting parties initially. So that is why I think it is crucial that you actually invite the parties that are involved in this contract, get more information on what it is exactly that you would like from, this fact-finding mission, and then go to the board with whatever you found or with asking for additional help. I just don't think that it is appropriate to, in the first instance, to go to the board and say, hey, help us fact-find this, situation. And so I would urge that the commission have their own hearing. It could even be a special hearing, a special meeting on just this aspect, so that you can fully vet everything that is going on and hear from the parties who are involved, because there's a lot of assumptions and there's a lot of things that are unanswered at this point. And so I just think that we're putting the board in a predicament where they're just going to say, well, what do you expect us to do? Why didn't you do it already?
Why didn't we do what already?
Have a hearing on this to get the information that you're requesting.
I mean, this gets back to the thing I mentioned before. We don't have any authority over these department heads, but the Board of Supervisors, they do, and they could ask them to pause the contracts. But for us, I mean, if these department heads proactively say we'll pause things while we have a hearing at your commission, then that's another story. But I don't think they're going to do that.
This contract went through an RFP. It's a public process. The whole public, the entire universe of anyone who is the public was allowed to see what the contract was about, was allowed to respond to the RFP. And so I think that in terms of notifying all the interested parties about what was going on, we've been fairly notified. And so I think that at this point, my recommendation, because, we have DCAs that work with the board and we have DCAs that do contracting. At this point, I think that the most appropriate place to have this discussion and to have this fact-finding mission is at the commission, at a commission meeting, because you are the ones who are asking these questions, right? And you are the ones that want answers. And so I just think, normally it's within the department to pause or cancel contracts, but I do also, from the information I know about this contract, it's a very limited short time frame, and it's not just limited to San Francisco. There are other counties in this involved in this contract. And so the thing is that if, the ultimate aim and goal of this is to provide accessibility to voters, who have disabilities. And so, I think that there's just a lot of questions that we have in this process. And so I think the most appropriate, my recommendation would be to, hold a special meeting about this.
I'm open to calling a hearing. I'm really not Like, I really think it really is out of our jurisdiction. And as someone who's has a different role in public agency, the Board of Supervisors have done it, so I would kind of disagree on that, but I'm not gonna hear and argue that and fight where we hear it. If the commission's open to it, I'm okay with hearing the item at the Elections Commission. And I would maybe urge the public to then reach out to the Board of Supervisors, because it is kind of weird that we're like that we have to go and have to do this, and the board has taken hearings on many matters that were not part of their jurisdiction, and they do this type of hearings all the time as informational items. And so while I sort of disagree with what you're saying, DCA Flores, like, I'm also okay with moving forward with calling a hearing on this side. But yeah, I'll just say that.
And again, this is my recommendation. You could take it or leave it. But I think that given the tight timeline of the board's meetings in the next coming weeks because of the holiday schedule, I think that maybe you would have a shorter turnaround to accomplish what you are looking for, to get more information.
Thank you very much for that, Attorney Flores. So we have a motion on the table, but we also have a attorney's recommendation that we, prior to approaching the board for a hearing, hold our own probably special meeting, calling the aforementioned department heads and interested parties. I don't know, and also to ask the public to reach out to the board for hearings. Commissioner Jung, do you have any thoughts on that since you made the motion?
No, I still think the right route is to send this to the body that has jurisdiction over this matter, and that's not us. So I think that is the right route. But, open to intermediate possibilities, like, if someone wants to call the interested parties and ask them, get their questions answered, I suppose that's fine, but I don't think that's going to impact our ultimate conclusion.
And can I ask, if the commission asks the board, I've learned from you all, thank you, that we have the position to do that. They could say nope, right? And I'm asking this to say, suppose they say nope, we could then hold an elections commission hearing of our own, I'm assuming, but how quickly might they say nope? No idea. Okay. All right. Any other commissioner comments, thoughts?
I would just suggest strategically. Oh, sorry, I think someone was talking.
I was going to say, because of those two, very different scenarios, you could do both. You could refer this to the board and have a hearing on your own, so you're covering both bases. But that's just because we don't know how, what the turnaround for the board is going to be. And we also don't know if, like, maybe they're like, oh, this isn't a priority at this point, and so we're going to, table this to January.
Got it, which does not seem like a good idea. Commissioner Jung, and then I think Commissioner Jordanek had his hand up, and then we do have more callers, and if it's appropriate, I would request that we make time to hear from them. But Commissioner Jung.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, Commissioner Jordanek said that he's in touch with, Supervisor Walton's chief of staff or legislative aide or whoever that person is, and he's going to be wrapped up in the legislative process for drafting that ordinance. I personally, I don't think the letter by itself is going to do anything, just my opinion. So, I would suggest that Commissioner Jordanek, walk his contact at the supervisor's office through the concern and ask, be there to answer questions and to urge action on it. That to me seems the highest likelihood of success.
Commissioner Jordanek?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have this contact already. I could voice the concern. If I'm able to go to them and say, like, look, this is something the commission has voted for too, that just makes it even more likely. And
Yeah.
who knows, maybe they'll even suggest to us an alternative approach. Maybe they'll say, oh, you want to speak to the auditor's office or something,
Right.
like Commissioner Jung was saying.
Yeah.
But I like that approach that you just outlined.
Very good. Great.
And President Bernholtz, it's a technical thing, but if the members of the public, I'm okay with the second public comment, but like not if it's a repeated public comment. I just think it's not fair to have someone just speak again. So I just want to be clear about that.
Oh, you mean opening the call back up to folks?
Yeah, or if
as
you
long as
are,
they're new voices.
yeah, I would prefer to just hear from new voices.
Thank you for that. That
But
also
it is your
seems,
call.
well, no, that seems fair, and I'm getting good at reading 2/3 of people's phone numbers here. Let me just clarify for everyone where we are. We have a motion on the table that would be a letter from the president to the Board of Supervisors to learn more and investigate this, calling to the board and hearing the aforementioned groups. I don't know if we want to amend that to include the suggestion that Commissioner Jordanic also reach out directly to President Walton's staff to draw their attention to this, knowing that if and then at period, that's the end of the motion. And then there's an understanding that should the Board of Supervisors deprioritize or not be interested in this, that this commission might call a special hearing of our own. That's where we are. Clarifying, folks. Okay.
Yeah, I would just say maybe not limited to President Walton. Maybe
yes.
There's another supervisor.
Okay. Very good. Let me, Secretary Delgadillo, if you could please bring in the public here, we'll make a special exception to get these folks back in, as long as they're new callers.
Okay, I will unmute the first caller. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, everybody. Trent Lang, President of the California Clean Money Campaign. Again, sorry that I tried to speak in the regular part, but I wasn't able to get my hand raised properly, apparently. I'm really glad that Commissioner Jordanic raised this issue. This does seem an issue that is of intimate concern to the Elections Commission, not only involving open source monies, but in general being under different election systems. So I do agree that asking the Board of Supervisors, who has ultimate jurisdiction, is very important and valuable. I would also suggest that the motion include, and a couple of folks have talked about this, that you're also asking the supervisors to delay the contract and negotiations until they have had hearings. I think that's really, given the time crunch, that seems very important. But I'd also echo the Deputy City Attorney's suggestion that it may be useful to have a special hearing yourself quickly, perhaps in addition, because the supervisors may not act quickly enough. They may not have time for the research. They may not feel there's enough at this current time to even call for a delay until they have gotten more facts. And you're having a special hearing and calling all the different appropriate department heads who could help answer some of these questions that you have not been made aware of, and that even the Department of Elections has apparently not been made aware of, would be probably very helpful for the supervisor's decision-making process as well. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Lang. There's another caller.
Yes, I am. You're unmuted, caller. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Jim Soper from the National Voting Rights Task Force. First of all, you cannot wait to have an Elections Commission hearing and then expect the Board of Supervisors to do something. They need to affirm that they are not going to sign any contract until they have a hearing and until we have other hearings and dig up more information. This is too time critical, and it's too critical for our national security. Among other things, we have an indication that this federal grant, there was a letter called a narrative that we're not sure where it came from, but probably from UASI. They equated voter fraud with terrorism. go look up the definition of terrorism. Nowhere would voter fraud qualify. It has to include violence, and that's including FBI definitions. So that's another evidence that we're going to have to find out what was in that proposal for the grant, because something's definitely not right, and it should not take at least 6 months, maybe a year and a half, for the Elections Commission to hear about this. And most of City Hall knows there's an Elections Commission, and nobody mentions it to them. Something's very wrong here, and we need to dig in and find out what's going on. And then on a positive note, I was able to sit in on the Voter Accessibility Advisory Committee hearing, the last one about a week or two ago, and I would compliment Mr. Arndt for running most of that very well. He was working on getting drop boxes, making them more accessible, and asking other questions. That was very good. But we need to know what's going on, and people are hiding this from the Elections Commission, They're hiding it from, and they're hiding from the public, and that's just not acceptable. The supervisors are going to have to hear about this, and we're going to put pressure on them to hold a proper hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sober, and thank you for bringing in that additional concern. Okay, we now have cleared the public comment. I'm wondering, the motion as it stands now is simply to reach out to the Board of Soups and ask for a hearing. There have been several tweaks to that, including requesting that they stop the contract, including the direct contact from Commissioner Jordanic, and I would offer my assistance in that as well, Commissioner Jordanic, if helpful. And also the likelihood of a special meeting of this commission. Commissioner Jung, do you wish to modify your motion in any way? You're on mute.
Sorry, I will add, I agree with Mr. Lang's addition, and would add that, so specifically would add that the Board of Supervisors, urge the Board of Supervisors to immediately put a halt to the execution of any contract. You know, the other portions about, you know, you and, you know, the president and Commissioner Jordanic speaking to whomever you think would effectuate that this motion is, we can make it part of the motion, I guess. So we could just add that, you know, we authorize the president and the president's designee to take any action to effectuate the resolution.
Okay. And I need another second, I guess. Thank you for that. Commissioner Jordanic.
I'll second those amendments.
Right. Okay. Any further discussion? Can't see the other commissioner. Commissioner Mogi, are you ready to vote? Yes. Okay. Thanks. Secretary Delgadillo, could you take a vote
Sure.
on the motion?
President Bernholz,
Yes.
Vice President Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Mogi,
Yes.
and Commissioner Jordanic.
Yes.
With 4 in the affirmative, the motion passes. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, everyone. Almost there. Item number 7, Commissioner's Report. Discussion and possible action on Commissioner's Reports on topics not covered by another item on this agenda. Meetings with public officials, oversight and observation activities, long-range planning, proposed legislation, which affects the legislation. Attachments are the blockchain voting letter, which I believe was a letter from the public about the issue we just discussed. Yeah. Are there any commissioner reports? No. All right. I would just take a moment to additionally thank Commissioner Jordanic for the extraordinary amount of work that he's been doing. And he's been doing all of this, and we've been discussing it. So is there any public comment on commissioners' reports?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, I think we can call this item addressed. Director's report. Discussion and possible action on the director's report. Attachments include the report and the Office of the Controller's payroll report and the department's responses to that audit. Director Arntz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Bernhold. So just on my report, I want to remind people there is an election ongoing. So we have the ballot simplification committee meetings start this Friday, and also again on Monday, because again, local recalls in San Francisco are defined as ballot measures. So the BSC must meet, and then they'll also talk about the language of the measures, as well as words you need to know, and perhaps FAQs. So the meetings will start at 10 a.m. On both days. Then also on the 22nd is we'll actually, since the recall questions are ballot measures, we have to assign letters to those measures. So so on Monday we'll select which ballot measure or which local official goes first on the ballot, goes second, and go third in relation to the recall elections. Then also the following Monday is the deadline at noon for paid arguments. So since recall questions are ballot measures, then that means members of the public can submit paid arguments for and against the recall. So that's Monday, the 29th at noon. Then also I want to indicate that we will be submitting an election plan for your next meeting. And then also the waiver regarding the prohibition of city employees assisting the department. So that'll be in your December meeting. And other than that, I think I could just take questions on the report and then go into the audit.
Okay. Are there any questions from commissioners on Director Arntz's report?
Oh, can I say, sorry, one more thing?
Oh, yeah, please.
Just so Friday's the deadline for anyone filing for the assessor recorder contest. So this Friday, 5 p.m. is the deadline for filing nomination forms. That's it.
Commissioner Jordanek.
Yeah, thank you for your report, Dr. Arntz. So I had a question about something that's not listed there, and maybe you can comment on. I was sort of like perusing an agenda of the COIT, and are you doing a presentation tomorrow related to the use of cameras or something, video cameras?
I thought we were done. So all city departments that use any cameras have to receive approval or have a review, and then potentially receive approval from the city, from COIT. So we use Nest cams for our own purposes. Like we use Nest cams to stream our activities on our website. So when we do ballot processing, remake, the canvas down at the warehouse, we stream that. So we had to inform COIT of the use of those cameras. That also we use cameras internally to watch the lines at the City Hall voting center. So we also had to put that forward. But I thought we had been approved for that. I'm not aware of us having to present anything tomorrow.
Okay. And then just related to that, it's kind of linked to the drop boxes. Do you have to have cameras on the drop boxes? Is that like something that the state requires?
It's not a requirement. It's certainly suggested, but it's not a requirement for the drop boxes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Mogi.
Thank you, Director Arntz, for this report. I just had a question on the Dropbox. It says that 17, it's a minimum of 17, and we will provide 34. Are they just evenly distributed across the city?
Well, no. So we're focusing in areas that tend to have lower turnout for the drop boxes. So not all districts will have the same amount of drop boxes. For instance, there'll be, I think, either 4 or 5 in District 10, and I think 2 in District 2. So it was based on turnout more so than anything else. So they will not be distributed evenly throughout the city.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I just wanted to say thanks. I participated in just sitting in. I didn't just sat in and listened, but your team was so great to the district staff and just being so thoughtful of, you know, how to even reach out and engage with our site leaders and making sure they can have polling places, but being very thoughtful because it ends up becoming multiple use. And so I just have to kind of, you know, praise your team again and how wonderful they are and thoughtful they are. I've received so many feedback from our site leaders and others how, you know, the first recall was in September. It was beginning of the school year, and so it was just chaotic overall. And we discussed that briefly, but this time around, everyone feels really great about it, and really appreciates your flexibility from your department. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because I think that I've never heard my team say, you know, this might be one of the strongest partnership we have with the city agency. And so I thought that was just very sweet. Your team's incredible in trying to work with our kind of our ever busy principals at the school sites to do it together. So
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate that.
Well done. Any other questions or comments? I have one, the very last item on your report, item B, page 404. Voting Works provided an estimated list of items and costs associated with the pilot program. Is this this is beyond the conversation that on the is this what is my question? What are the costs that they provided? What have they said are the costs?
I don't remember
are these
the number.
Costs to them or costs to the department?
To them. So for the contract that we'll have to enter with Voting Works, we have to indicate the cost that they're providing, that they're going to cover for the city.
Right.
That's why I was asking for that information. I don't remember the number.
Okay.
It was for one ballot marking device in the City Hall Voting Center.
Okay. So I am assuming, and this is if an incorrect assumption, then it's a request that prior to any submitted plan outline documentation to the Secretary of State, all of this, that the commission would be given a copy of the proposed plan to review.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, the only thing is, I mean, February is a deadline, and
right.
Probably have to be. I mean, I don't know if next month. Maybe, yeah. I guess either next month or January. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Mobley.
So in the next meeting, will you propose like a potential April plan as well? Like, I'm just really not sure how timing wise it works. Like, are we going to approve a waiver, like just in case for an April election? Like what are your thinking around what?
We could do that. Yeah. I mean, I'm not against that. Certainly.
Oh.
Yeah.
I just think it's like weird timing. We meet once a month and then we kind of want to make sure we do both, but I don't know if you'll have that ready. You know, it's kind of a quick turnaround. So.
You mean the election plan or the election plan? No, we would be making changes to the plan for each election. But the waiver, we could make a waiver for multiple elections.
And then will you present an election plan like in March then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, before actually, because April, it'd be
February.
Yeah, the February meeting. I think the day after the February meeting is when we'd have to go through the election plan for the April election, potential April election.
Yeah. And I have a technical question. When it comes to recalls and locally, like, how does that, like, I didn't even know how it would happen on the state. We would just have to verify, you would have to verify the election for it to then, the recall to actually, if candidates do get recalled, then do they have to resign from the seat once it's verified or after, you know, or is there a certain date? How does that work in terms of technicality when a local recall election happens?
Deputy State Attorney Flores may need to correct me, but I believe it's 10 days after the board declares the results. So the director of elections certifies election results, Then the results are sent to the board supervisor. They declare the results.
Oh,
And 10 days after the board declares is when the vacancy occurs if someone is recalled.
That doesn't happen you don't give the board, what did you say? They have to like declare it? Like
Declare,
that's only
right.
for recall.
No, that's for all elections in the city.
Oh, see, this is where I'm like, I don't have a role in it. I just kind of spaced out. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I certify the board declares at every election that we conduct.
Got it. I think I only get the memo when you certify. So I never think about
Yeah,
what
right.
happens after, to be honest.
Yeah,
I've
right.
never even thought about it. I just thought you make the call and it's done. So, and I get your email for that, and then I never hear after. So, okay, noted.
Commissioner Jordanek, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I actually had a follow-up question about the contract. What is the timeline on that? Like, is that something that you're just preparing in advance, or does that need to be signed either before or after, like the February 8th deadline and things? Do
It
you
won't
know
be
about
done
that?
it's going to take months. Just
Oh,
not,
it takes.
not on my, just the city's process. So we just have to get the agreement set, then move it through. But no,
I see.
I don't think there's no need to get the contract complete and then approved by February.
I see. So this is just something that would happen sometime next year if things get to that point. Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
And one final question from me, turning to the audit. Thank you for providing the department's response. I noticed that 7 of the 8 items were concur and closed, and that item 4 was do not concur and closed. So my question here is whether or not there's any additional feedback from the auditor regarding your response to why you don't concur and why it needs to go this way. Is there anything else they ask you to attend to, or is this sort of the final word on it?
They said they will follow up periodically to ensure that we've implemented what we said we would.
Okay.
As far as the one that we did not concur, it's just a matter of logistics because we have a lot of temporary folks.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not, doesn't really make sense for like who might work here for 2 days literally to teach them how to get onto the city's payroll system.
Yep.
I don't expect that to change, but
Yep.
we have implemented the procedures where we check our internal timesheet process to the city's official timesheet system. So.
Okay. Yeah, it seemed to me from reading this whole thing that it's the number of temporary employees that you manage that. Great. Any other questions for Director Arntz? Any members of the public?
I don't see anyone's hands raised.
Okay, then I think we can move on from item number 8. Thank you very much, Director Arntz. The last item is discussion and possible action regarding items for future agendas. So come December regular meeting, we will have the election plan and the waiver, possibly also the waiver for April as well. Very good idea. I am quite sure that the discussion on the remote ballot completion item is going to require a special meeting. So we'll have to work on timing of that. Are there any other items for December? We are cutting on time, just noting for stating the obvious, an annual performance review. The election of new officers is, in my experience, happened in January, not in December. And I thought there was one other item, but I don't see it in my notes. Are there any other items?
Oh, this isn't another item, but maybe if it's, I don't know what the protocol is, but I know that we're looking for an appointment from the city attorney's office. And I know also from the Board of Education, but they have not been focused on that. I've been trying to see if it could be agendized. It's been taken off the agenda a couple of times due to kind of the dire needs that exist at the Board of Education right now. And so I'm not sure if this is an appropriate ask for DCA Flores, but if it's all right to go up your chain to just remind that there is also a vacancy in the Elections Commission, or if it's better if we reach out. I just don't want to overstep, obviously, because you're part of the office. So if you have thoughts on that.
We've been very transparent with our new city attorney about, you know, his role in this next process. So it's on his radar.
Okay.
If any of you have any people that you think may be great on the commission, feel free to send them my way or Deputy City Attorney Shen's way. And we could, you know, vet them or present them because, you know, we should get it filled as soon as possible. So that is on our radar.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
The one other item was the annual report. That's the other
that-
missing.
Yeah.
Knew I'd remember it. All right. I see no other comments or thoughts about other items. No public comment. Thank you all for an extraordinarily detailed and important set of work. It is 6:20 by my clock. I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and take good care.
You too. Thank you.